This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Emotionless Hinata Travel Back in Time for Naruto. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Hinata Hyuga appeared to have gained new motivation and purpose in the days following the conclusion of the Fourth Shinobi War. She appeared as young and regal as a teenager in their 20s, but she was already getting close to her 30s. Whatever transpired during her final moments with Naruto Uzumaki, her crush and love interest since she was 6 years old, had transformed the once timid and shy Hinata into a dangerous and fearsome individual. Once more, her crush was killed by Sasuke Uchiha's betrayal, and she ruthlessly killed him in front of the whole shinobi army. She used her training under the Godem Hokage and the world's greatest female medic to personally break every bone and tear apart most of his muscles as she destroyed his Sharingan, keeping him alive and letting him die only after she destroyed his genitals with a chakra-enhanced strike that caused them to blow like an explosive tag. His cries for mercy had made even the most merciless in battle hardy people cringe. Sasuke had pretended to surrender when he entered the camp. He was able to attack Naruto from behind when he was by himself, and he used reverse summoning to send Naruto and Tsunade's Senju to Madara. Two of the arrays had been disabled by Hinata, but Naruto had already been captured and his Baiju removed. Even though the Toads were able to reverse summon him once more, the damage had already been done. The following day, Naruto had died while sealing the unfinished Ten Tails with the Shiki Fuin, the same jutsu that both the Sandaime and Yondaime had used. He had been grinning as he passed away, regretting to Hinata that he could not marry her and fulfill his vow to her. Because of his enormous reserves, Naruto was able to transfer all of his chakra into her, giving her almost 3 tails of chakra, making her an Uzumaki in terms of chakra. That was as good as marriage for Hinata. She bathed in the blood of her enemies, including traitors and Zetsu clones, on the day that the second aka no Shi, Crimson Death, was born. Even though she had not been able to kill Madara or engage in combat with him, she had defeated Kabuto and Orochimaru in a 2-on-1 battle, secretly knocking them out and sealing them with Fuinjutsu she had learned from her beloved Naruto and his custom Fuin tags that allowed a person or a corpse to be kept in suspended animation in a different dimension. Her entire young body was crimson red from the blood she shed. She had created blood clones using their blood to make people think they were dead in order to avoid raising suspicions. At this point, Hinata's only goal was to go back in time and take what Naruto and she had been denied. She had taken Kabuto and Orochimaru for that reason. She required their medical expertise and knowledge. And she was living for this reason. The old Coots on the Hyuga Council, who recalled the formidable Kushina Uzumaki and her abilities, were alarmed by her wartime moniker and made the wise decision to challenge her leadership of the clan and disparage her devotion to Naruto's memory. She had just killed them all, leaving only the moderate factions alive, and as a result, she became known as the Ice Maiden throughout Konoha. Since then, nobody has questioned her dedication to Naruto's memory, and even the Godem Tsunade Senju bestowed upon her the title of Honorable Uzumaki, despite the fact that she was one of Naruto's last relatives. Over the past few years, Hinata had been in charge of using the root tunnels, hideouts, and even a few of Orochimaru's labs that had not yet been found. These were situated far beneath Konoha. She used Fuinjutsu and torture to break both missing nin, and then she drowned them in an acid bath to get rid of them. She had learned about poisons, their remedies, and medical knowledge from Tsunade and Orochimaru, while Kabuto had taught her about his self-healing method and extensive experiments, which included the enhanced Edo Tensei. She had learned all of the Fuinjutsu scrolls that Naruto had left her, which he had obtained from Sandaime and Jiraiya. She used them to remove the caged bird seal and abolish it. Although the Yondaime had deftly connected the formula activation to Uzumaki blood, she was also able to learn the Hiroshin. He was able to use the much feared technique because he had received injections of both Senju and Uzumaki blood. Using Juken and chakra scalpels, she also created a new style of taijutsu. Her chakra control was superior to that of Tsunade and Sakura Haruno, two of the best female medics, including Shizune Kato. Hinata attempted to replicate Kushina Uzumaki's famous chakra chains as well, but she was unable to create more than 3 lethal chains using taijutsu. Through her raid on the root hideouts, she was able to discover a number of secrets about Konoha, the plans devised by the Danzo, Orochimaru alliance that led to the death of Sandaime Hokage, and other horrific actions taken by Root. She was aware that the jutsu she would employ would only return half of her chakra and her memories to her younger self. She needed to time it right to avoid suspicion, which was nearly impossible in a clan that could see tenketsu and chakra coils. Then, in order to keep herself from failing to save Naruto, she made a number of plans and backups. She had promised to make things right for her beloved, and she would do so even if it meant destroying Konoha. She only needed to wait to see him the last time because all of her plans and preparations were finished, including her affairs, which were resolved. The following day, since the day Nato rescued her from the bullies during her academy days, Hinata Hyuga had made it a habit to get up at 5 in order to go out early and stalk air. Before returning to her clan compound for breakfast, she watches her hero. She had discovered a lot about her crush, and her father had never asked her about this habit. She had gotten up and posed in front of the full-length mirror wearing only her lacy underwear, imagining Naruto with her as he committed various naughty acts on her, looking like the same stunning, lethal woman that Naruto had admitted she was while she was dying. During the war, Naruto had given her a set of clothes lined with seals, which was amazing to many shinobi and kunoichi and even prevented Byakugan and Sharingan from seeing it. She had decoded those seals and applied them to the majority of her clothing after the war, which had saved her life numerous times. As she dressed, she inspected her room to make sure there were no signs of her presence or experiments. She used a number of genjutsu and locking seals to conceal her will, which would vanish when her experiment was over and she was gone from this world. She expressed her gratitude to Kurenai Yuhi for teaching her patience and deceit in dealing with people. After giving it a quick glance, she chose to go face the music and wrapped herself in the cloak Naruto had given her. Several of her clansmen were waiting for her at the gates as she left her room and compound. She let out a quiet sigh and cursed in her mind that she had forgotten that Naruto was buried in the Hokage crypts on Konoha grounds as a reward for saving the world from destruction, and that most people would come to see him today. After half a day, the procession moved on, and Hinata returned, muttering to herself that people were wasting her time. She took every precaution she could because she was aware that Tsunade and Shikamaru were suspicious of her because of her unexamined disappearances from the village. She was aware that in order for her experiment to proceed without hiccups, Shikamaru and her former teammate Kiba needed to be neutralized. As a post-war wedding present, Shino and his wife had already traveled abroad at her request. Additionally, the act had reduced Tsunade's scrutiny of her, but not Shikamaru's. He was more paranoid than Danzo and just as smart. Although he was the head of the Anbu Black Ops division, he was known as Hokage's advisor. She had told Shikamaru to meet her at the Naruto memorial ceremony, so he was waiting for her when she walked to the gates of Training Ground 44. Before entering his line of sight, she flared her Byakugan and located his hidden guard, which contained 4 Anbu. She sighed, let go of her shadow clones to eliminate them, and concentrated on what would be her greatest challenge. He was leaning against the locked gates when his slack voice asked, "Why have you called me here, Hinata, on such a troublesome day?" Hinata Hyuga's icy voice said, "You don't have to act now, Shikamaru. I know what you have been planning for me." Shikamaru went on alert and motioned his guards to prepare. "So you admit to it, huh? Why confront me then? What are you doing, Hinata, and how would this end? I hope you have not been doing what is wrong." His thoughts raced through a number of possibilities, but for once he was unable to fully comprehend what Hinata had been up to. He knew from her obsession with fuinjutsu and kinjutsus that she was acting recklessly and dangerously. After the war, Hinata gained a reputation as a scholar who, like Orochimaru, had a thirst for knowledge. Hold on a second. Orochimaru, she didn't. With a chilly, sardonic laugh that chilled him to the core, Hinata gave him a chill. She gave him a sly smile as though she was aware of the conclusion he had reached and that he had collected chakra for his methods. No matter who aided him or stood in her way, he knew he would not make it through the day if she was really that serious. There was a reason she was called the aka no Shi, and he wished once more that Naruto had not perished at the hands of the treacherous idiot Sasuke that day. She leveled her Byakugan. Enhanced eyes at him, and he swallowed the fear that washed over him as her monstrous killing intent, ki, washed over him. He became anxious since his guards had not yet shown up. He shuddered at the pain he knew was coming as she said, "You know, Shikamaru, your guards won't come here. They have been indisposed for a small period of time. Now we talk and let us fulfill your curiosity about what I have been doing." The explanation was straightforward. Despite being a beautiful woman, Hinata was a deadly ninja with an ice-covered heart from losing Naruto. Everyone was aware that she had been the most impacted. The puzzle that had been bothering him for the past 7 years has finally been solved. The release of the truth was long overdue. Shikamaru froze in place as Hinata used a single-handed seal, cursing to himself for being caught so easily and displaying unexpected fuinjutsu. Behind him, 2 shadow clones of Hinata materialized, bound him with ninja wire, and then struck him repeatedly, preventing him from moving or forming chakra. She gave them a nod before approaching him and whispering softly in his ear, causing him to shudder at her tone. "I have been making research to travel back in time and save my Naruto from his death. Now then, Goodbye Shikamaru, and I hope to see you again when we are children." Shikamaru's eyes had widened by the end of his sentence, and he had barely time to grunt in agony before Hinata knocked him unconscious with 2 blows to the head and chest. Before she activated her final plan phase, she nodded to her clones, who led him to a remote location. She created clones and entered Orochimaru's underground laboratory in the Forest of Death, where they destroyed all evidence of her experiments and the documents pertaining to her final seal. Standing in the center of the enormous sealing array, she looked up at the sky and said, "I am coming, Naruto-kun. Just wait for me." She moved through the seals at a speed that would have driven a Sharingan crazy. She whispered softly as she finished her final hand seal. "Uzumaki Kinjutsu. Gyaku Taimu Apu. Kinjutsu Reverse Time Warp." And then she disappeared into her past in a flash of light. A tale's worth of chakra and a rush of memories poured into her body from the time stream, causing her pale lavender eyes to snap open. As her mind traveled to her mindscape, her youthful body arched. There, she marveled at the appearance of a woman who appeared to be an older version of herself in a whirl of crackling chakra, but she was too young to understand what was really going on with her. The young Hinata watched as the older woman grinned at her and said, "I want to help you, my dear Hinata. Tell me, do you want power to protect yourself or your family? Answer me honestly and I shall help you." Her voice was melodious but cold. The young, painfully shy Hinata asked her older counterpart, "Yes, I do want to be strong. Can you help me? What must I do?" "Okay. Accept me as you and we will merge. My skills and knowledge will become yours, but some changes will be there that I must warn you about. Think carefully as we two will become as one. And let me tell you about myself and why I am here." After speaking with her counterpart for a few hours, an ecstatic Hinata responded, "Yes, I accept your proposition." Both parties were unaware that this declaration had sealed the doom of a certain Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze, and his ascent to fame that would surpass that of any shinobi. As the young and the old merged into one, a light burst from Hinata's body. Her chakra grew stronger rather than weaker, as the older counterpart had feared, and her body aged by a few months without anyone, even her clan members, noticing. She took charge of her new body, got up, and started meditating to help her memories flow into her mind. She also used mindscape techniques she had learned from Ino Yamanaka to conceal the memories from mindwalkers and, as a precaution, to hide the entrance by making the mindscape appear more childlike. As she considered her strategy, she eliminated a number of plans because Sandaime Hokage would discover them. She also excluded the village civilian council and the Hyuga council, which, despite their ignorance, were very perceptive if they had anything to do with Naruto. As Hinata looked at the moon and flared her Byakugan occasionally to get used to its strain while performing stretches to feel her body, she thought, "Sorry Naruto-kun, it seems you have to suffer the village hatred for a few more years. Still, they would teach you your morals and get rid of your naivety. Until then, I will try to get the samples for experiments that will make both of us stronger." She did not want her beloved to be the same gullible fool who had let others walk over him and led to his premature death, so she made a number of extra arrangements and secret presents for him. Until then, she would plot and plan while watching the village, unaware that a vengeful goddess would be wreaking havoc on them. After 4 years, Hinata and, consequently, Naruto had not experienced many changes in the previous few years. However, Sandaime Hokage had been no closer to solving the puzzle since the day the Kumo ambassador was apprehended by 3-year-old Hinata Hyuga, who had nearly been abducted by the same man and sold to Kumo. Although the truth has never been revealed, the general idea gleaned from the man's damaged mind was that the Hyuga heiress was awake and sitting on the balcony, staring at the moon, when he had entered the room to kidnap her. The diplomat, cursing his luck, had attempted to seize her before she raised any alarms, but the girl had leapt at him and released what appeared to be a densely chakra-covered hand that was strong enough to cut through metal due to an uncontrollable chakra explosion. Before the other Hyugas arrived and brought the assailant to heel, she had ripped off half of his face and one eye. Sandaime had seen the diplomat's face and had controlled himself enough not to flinch at the ruthless manipulation of the man's features. After that day, the girl had become aloof and reclusive, and she appeared to have a frozen perspective on the world that was comparable to that of the Ice Queen of Konoha, a certain Kurenai Yuhi. When the attacker was subdued, she remained uneasy and even used the same technique that others had dubbed Hake Tamasha, Tenkin, 8 trigrams, Soul Dagger, to attack her own father. As soon as Hiyashi Hyuga heard the Kumo diplomat's cries, she rushed into her daughter's room and attempted to stop Hinata from attacking the man anymore. With a furious expression in her eyes, the girl leapt at him and cut his face with her palm, leaving him with 5 diagonal scars that would never go away. Fortunately, her eyes were unharmed. Hiyashi had saved his dignity, or what remained of it, by knocking the girl out. When Hiruzen had delivered his report, he had chuckled at the irritated expression on the Hyuga clan head's face. This led to a cold war with Kumo, who refused to accept that the diplomat had been apprehended and essentially demanded that Konoha turn over a main branch Hyuga, or, as they put it, the individual who had attacked their honorable diplomat. Kumo even had the audacity to threaten war against Konoha if their demands were not fulfilled. Previously, Sandaime would have taken any action to stop the war, but after seeing the girl's terrified and lifeless face, he ended all conversations and went to Kuminari no Kuni with Danzo and Jiraiya to express his clear opinion of Kumo and their demands to Daimyo. He even told the Raikage that Konoha was waiting and used his bluff of war to challenge him. The Cold War situation had gotten worse, and tensions had only decreased, if not completely disappeared, since the new Raikage took office last year. Sandaime Hokage's headache came from a different source as well. Kyuubi no Kitsune, the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, is one Uzumaki Naruto. He erred by declaring the Council Minato's desire to view Naruto as a hero for fending off the Kyuubi, but the people of Konoha, blinded by their rage and hatred, ignored his wishes, and he soon found himself attempting to keep Naruto away from those who would hurt him. The choice to tell others backfired, and Naruto was shunned by the village's social elite. The young child was attacked by people in their rage and hatred, and as a result of his ignorance, he quickly turned into a social outcast and a goofball. Naruto endured unspeakable cruelty and adversity after being abandoned by the people he could rely on to teach him something. After being kicked out of the orphanage at the age of 4, Hiruzen discovered Naruto rummaging through the trash for food after a year of being abandoned. He was on his way to see Hinata Hyuga to see how she was doing following the traumatic event. The village council, the civilian side, and his advisors, including the warhawk Danzo, were all still affected by Hiruzen's towering rage, which he had sparked after witnessing the callousness of the residents of his beloved village. When Naruto was eating from the trash, 7 drunks attacked him in front of him, and he himself broke their arms and legs. As a warning to everyone, the enraged shinobi no Kami publicly executed 3 of his Anbu, 7 Chunin, and 2 Junin who had fabricated reports about Naruto's financial situation and well-being after the poor boy fainted from the key. The boy was given an apartment by him, and he then dispatched Tenzo and Neko, 2 of the best Anbu, to teach him survival skills and social skills. In order to find the boy a friend in his age range, he had also introduced him to Hinata. Even though Hiyashi had initially objected to the choice, he was compelled to change his mind after witnessing the icy, heartless Hinata smile a little in the boy's company. To his delight, they had become friends. Because they were afraid that Sandaime, who had tightened control over the village, would win reluctant respect from his rival Danzo, the people of Konoha had been warned to ignore the boy in silence, but they had never mistreated him or glared at him. In order to avoid the Sandaime showing preference to them until they were forced to be paired together, Naruto and Hinata agreed to expedite their time at the Ninja Academy by only attending for 3 years, rather than the usual 5. However, they stipulated that they would begin the academy at the age of 10 in order to get to know other kids their own age and avoid being placed on the same teams. Sarutobi Hiruzen was an elderly man who had fought in 3 shinobi wars, but he was unaware that he had been duped by a girl who was entirely focused on a certain blonde boy, with whom she had already made the decision to live her entire life and ensure that he lived to a ripe old age in contrast to his own. Hinata's viewpoint. Hinata had been anticipating this day, training for it, and carefully manipulating her plans ever since her arrival day. Even her father had asked her to stop training for a while in order to prevent her from hurting her body because she had trained so hard and cruelly. Additionally, her icy, heartless demeanor had done a fantastic job of making everyone in the Hyuga Council extremely anxious around her, preventing her from harming them in the same way that she had the Kumo diplomat and her father. Despite not foreseeing the impact of her actions on global politics, Hinata chose to undergo trauma in order to solidify her act and cope with the pressure. She had also raided the Orochimaru labs in the village and used the seals she remembered, engraved on her clothing, to make trips to the root headquarters. Her attempt to obtain the DNA of Madara Uchiha and the first Hokage had been successful, but she had failed to obtain the DNA of Kushina and Mito Uzumaki because their crypts required the blood of an Uzumaki in addition to freshly donated blood in order to be opened. After careful planning and consideration, she was able to get Sandaime to pay attention to Naruto, even though it had taken some time. It was easier to get those drunks to beat up her beloved, but no real gain comes without pain, she told herself. All she had to do was use a small genjutsu on Naruto, which forced him to wander the alley she knew Sandaime frequently visited, asking him to get her cinnamon buns, which were only available from one shop in Konoha. After making them drink excessively, she had them lie in wait for Naruto and egg them until they were literally flushed. When one of them had smashed a bottle on his head and another had beaten him in the ribs with a pipe, she had flinched, but Sandame had reacted right away. She had cried a few times that night at her behavior, but she forced herself to stop. She needed to reach adolescence in order to truly master her emotions because the bonding had thrown her emotional equilibrium out of balance. It had been simple to get Sandame to meet Naruto because she had told him about the incident and even remarked that the boy was similar to her. In an attempt to help Hinata regain her sanity and gain Naruto a friend, the Hokage had been overly eager for them to meet. The old man was easily manipulated because of his guilt. Old fool with sentimentality. Before he had everything under control, his actions had almost split the village into many factions. Naruto opened up to her easily after that. He only needed to be forced to remove the mask in order for him to reveal himself to her. She made the decision that day to never betray his confidence again. She got him a number of books on human anatomy, psychology, politics, history, etiquette, calligraphy, and emotional control. The Sandame had given him a flat in the Shinobi district close to one Kurenai Yuhi's caretaker's apartment. In order to be safe, he had also had security seals engraved. It had been simple to force Naruto to read those books. She only needed to convince him that he had become addicted to them and that they were essential for a Hokage to fully understand such things. She also taught him the taijutsu master of Konoha, Maeda Gai, and helped him study before gently urging him to read books that were necessary for shinobi. She had taken him aside before entrusting him to the Junin's care, threatening to turn him into a eunuch if he turned her beloved Naruto into his mini-clone. Before she had controlled her ki to avoid raising suspicions, the man had shuddered at the crazy expression in her eyes. Whatever you think of Maeda Gai, if you can get past his oddball style and eccentricity, he was a very astute ninja. Breaking Naruto's naive to copyright and stupidity, the belief that ninjas were a group of cool people who saved princesses, defeated bad guys, helped the poor, and all that Rota was one of the hardest and most mind-numbing tasks Hinata found she had to perform. He had died young as a result of this way of thinking, and she would be damned if she let him adopt that mindset once more. It wasn't that difficult, boy. She had given him the rabbit test as her first assignment. When she had given him a rabbit as a pet and asked him to take care of it for 6 months, he had given her a cute little blink. She had given him a knife at the end of his time and instructed him to kill the rabbit. Despite crying and complaining, Naruto did everything his 7-year-old brain could think of to stop murder. She had become extremely irritated trying to explain to him what it meant to be a ninja, and by putting him through a number of those tests, she had been able to expose him to the harsh realities of the world and shatter his innocent Fa section aid. After killing the rabbit, he went into shock, and it took him 3 weeks to recover from his trembling and fears. Even though it was cruel of her to say so, Hinata reminded him of what the villagers had done to him when he was younger and explained in plain terms what would happen to him if he allowed himself to become naive about reality. The serious Naruto that came out of that conversation resembled Hinata's cultivated cold look. They both understood, particularly Naruto, who had been forced to read the first and second Hokage and other ninja journals. Hinata had ensured that Naruto had lost his ebullience, inability to remain motionless, and hyperactivity after he had learned a number of new things. She had taught him shogi to sharpen his mind and meditation to calm him. She had also gotten him books on tactics and strategy. Overall, over the course of 4 years, Hinata transformed Naruto Uzumaki into a boy capable of being regarded as a clan leader, possessing a sharp mind, multiple ninja skills, and exceptionally strong fundamentals. All things considered, it was what she desired, but now she wanted Naruto to learn about his ancestry, which meant visiting the destroyed grounds of Uzu no Kuni and Uzushiogakure. However, if Naruto were to just vanish for a year, Sandame would also be aware. When she recalled the letter that one Uzumaki, Senju Mito, had written to her great-grandfather, she realized she had to convince him. With a devilish smile on her face, she retired to her room and started planning the next afternoon's encounter with the Sandame Hokage. 9 years following the attack on Kyuubi, several ninjas walking the road and rooftops gave them solemn nods of respect as 2 children, a boy and a girl, were seen walking hand in hand with each other. The civilians along the road moved aside to give them space. The children themselves were stunning, and many young mothers and women remarked to themselves that they were like a blessed couple because they were such a sweet couple at such a young age. These kids weren't your typical kids. The first was Hinata Hyuga, the heiress of the Hyuga clan and known in the village as the Ice Maiden of Hyuga. The second was Naruto Uzumaki, a resident of Kyuubi no Kitsune and, unbeknownst to him, a Namikaze and the son of Yondaime Hokage and Uzumaki Kushina of the Uzushiogakure royal house. They were both dressed in Warring Clans era attire. The girl wore a high-collared, ornate crimson-red kimono with black sandals and the Hyuga symbol on the back of the obi that was tied around her waist. Her lavender eyes gazed at the world with a calculating and icy expression, and her blue hair reached her mid-back. The boy was dressed in black leather anbu style clothing that fit him like a second skin, revealing his entire body, including a tall, strong torso designed for grace and speed. His crimson-red Uzumaki swirl on the back of the bluish silver plate armor, which was worn by shinobi of the past, demonstrated his loyalty to the dreaded Uzumaki clan. Only his icy blue eyes and the top portion of his face were visible due to the crimson face mask covering his face. He looked like a nobleman because of his long, blonde hair, which was wild and spiky. As they approached, both of them sliced through the civilians, looking like dangerous shinobi. They came to a huge structure that served as the Hokage Tower at the end of the road. They went inside together and walked hand in hand through the building, climbing the floors. After asking the secretary if the Hokage was available, they made their way to the highest level and entered the office. The secretary, who was already accustomed to the presence of the well-known ice duo of Konoha, was unfazed by their presence and smiled at them when they entered the office, giving her a smile in return. As they entered the office, they saw Sandaime Hokage and Sarutobi Hiruzen sitting behind the desk in his fire cage robes, smoking his favorite pipe and gazing out the window at the Hokage mountain, which was adorned with the faces of the former cages and his late successor, Yandaime Hokage, who died sealing the Kyuubi in his son. He turned to face them, grinning like a grandfather, nodded for them to take a seat, settled in, and then started talking. "Good morning to you too. How are you on this fine day, Hinata and Naruto-kun? What can this old man do for you? I hope you have no problems with the civilians?" Naruto said, "No, Hokage-sama, it is nothing like that, and though we are in good health, we would like to discuss something with you. But before that, I would like to personally thank you for helping us till now, and we both are incredibly grateful for that. Right, Hinata?" Hinata just nodded, grinning. Naruto was a very gregarious and brash person before he met Hinata. But she had used her simple hard work and stubbornness to almost beat those out of him. Despite this, he continued to refer to the Hokage as Gigi, an old man, because the Hokage actually served as the surrogate grandfather. Sarutobi Hiruzen had witnessed firsthand how Hinata's presence affected Naruto. The young brazen boy's intelligence had grown and his hyperactivity had been controlled, and he had become more socially adept and tempered. She was excellent for her, and although it seemed that Hinata had a greater influence on the boy, in reality, Hinata had changed from her pre-incident self to one who was more gregarious and expressive. He was pleased to have saved 2 lives while minimizing his meddling, and it had been a wise choice to introduce them to one another. He made a discreet signal with his free hand that caused all of the Anbu in his office to leave the room while remaining on high alert. "Okay, then. The office is secure. What do you both want to talk to me about?" he asked. "It seems that there is still one," said Hinata, shaking her head and pointing to a particularly dark corner of the room's ceiling with her Byakugan while holding her senbon in her other hand. She jumped to avoid a hail of kunai that were embedded in the chair as soon as she finished speaking. While the other Anbu attacked the intruder while protecting the children, the Sandaime leapt across the room in the direction of the attacker. The young, unassuming shinobi was taken prisoner and bound after a few minutes of fighting, but before he could move, a seal was placed on his chest, locking his chakra and movements. A very irate looking Hokage yelled, "Take this shinobi to the Anbu cells and keep watch over him. And save myself, no one, including the elders or Anbu, are to approach him. Those who do are to be captured and brought immediately before me. Otherwise get ready to be executed for treason." This made everyone's jaws drop and their eyes widen. He raised an eyebrow at Hinata and Naruto's composed faces as he turned to face them, who were being held by the other Anbu. Perhaps the relationship affected their innocence and childish mindset more than he initially thought. After removing the intruder and casting a cone of silence with a sealing technique, he turned to face the kids and saw them both putting away the senbon they were holding as they made their way to the chairs. Seeing the young kids behave more like seasoned shinobi made him feel a great deal of regret. "This office is now secure, so what was that you two had to discuss before this fiasco? I hope what happened a few minutes before is not mentioned to the others because it is a village secret. I hope you understand?" he asked with both of them nodding. "Lord Hokage, we both have come to talk about a woman named Mito Uzumaki Senju and this letter that she wrote to my great-grandfather, which essentially is a marriage contract between the clans and a treaty for support of one clan to another during hardships. But since the letter was misplaced, whether intentionally or not, and my great-grandfather died soon after, caused the terms to be postponed to next generation as agreed upon by both the parties. We both did our research and found out that Naruto-kun is a true Uzumaki and his mother is no one else than Uzumaki Kushina, also known the S-ranked ninja of this village, called as aka No Shi or the Crimson Death. But the letter also states that the couple that is supposed to marry is supposed to go towards the Uzu no Kuni for receiving a special inheritance. Also, the other terms and conditions are in the letter, which you are no doubt reading right now. But first we want to know, why did you hide the truth from Naruto about his parents, and why the history of Uzumaki clan and their roles in the foundation of Konoha forgotten and not taught to children in the academy? All my friends and other children tell that the non-existent Uchiha clan is praised for many things and the other clans are glossed over or just not told enough. Has the memory of this village has gotten that bad that they would leave out a cousin clan of the Senju clan out of history, or the fact that they were our allies, and not the least the reason of spiral in the leaf and on the back of our jackets has been forgotten? Maybe I should talk to the other clans, as this village, which can forget the relatives of the founders of the same village, will not take long to forget us too, no matter what we do and how much blood we may shed for this village. Is this how we take care of our culture and our history, Lord Hokage? Answer me this, or maybe act more like you ought to, Lord Hokage, for I cannot see how much hypocritical we all are acting. By your leave then, and please have a nice day," spoke Hinata while showing how much she was affected by the discovery of such a secret. Sarutobi Hiruzen had hoped for a very uneventful day when he woke up this morning. However, the day and morning were not going as planned. He was initially taken aback to see the ice duo of Konoha in his office wearing what he recognized as shinobi attire from the time of the warring clans, particularly the Senju clan's design. Given that his Uzumaki ancestors favored traditional attire, as Lady Mito and Kushina once did, he had once observed a preference for both Naruto and Hinata and had pondered whether this was a peculiarity or a result of his genetic makeup. When the girl mentioned the intruder, he was perplexed as to how a 9-year-old girl could have penetrated an exceptionally well done a rank genjutsu, something he had failed to notice because of his advanced age and complicity, which he had allowed to lull him in following the Kyuubi attack. His choices lacked his methodical touch, and he had given Danzo and his former teammates too much power, which made them haughty and difficult to manage. The fact that the civilian council had the audacity to erase such a significant portion of the village's history, however, was what really enraged him, and he deduced that neither his rival nor his teammates had taken any action to preserve that portion of their past. If Hashirama-sensei and Tobirama-sensei found out that the village had betrayed its erstwhile allies, they would slap him and the entire community. Additionally, it is better for everyone if Mito-sama is kept quiet. Both the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha, his rival, were terrified of that woman. Less well known was the fact that, despite her kindness and compassion, Lady Mito was actually a terrifying taskmaster, and her mind came up with new, terrifying ways to use Fuinjutsu. Madara Uchiha lost to Hashirama Senju because the Lady Mito had been assisting him in neutralizing the Mangekyo Sharingan's attacks and had even used a seal to subdue the Kyuubi. As Tobirama-sensei was busy tending to them, Hiruzen recalled the day when Lady Mito was asked to train them. The brutality and effectiveness of the lessons that were instilled in them when Danzo and Kaharu mouthed off to her and called her an old hag still made them shudder with fear. Sarutobi was the least battered of all of them, and he had been in the hospital for the next 2 weeks. Later in life, Homura frequently lamented that his arms still felt strange. In order to prevent Lady Mito from pursuing him in his afterlife, Sarutobi Hiruzen thought it might be wiser for him to deal with the foolishness of the civilians and his teammates. But first he had to cope with a fresh headache brought on by the letter he was reading. For him, the Uzumaki clan, and the Hyuga clan, this letter had opened a can of worms. This letter, which contained a lot of legalese, was also sent to the ruler of Iron Country and the daimyo of Hai no Kuni at the time as a record for both clans. However, the following points could be used to summarize the main ideas of the letter and contract. 1. It was not possible to coerce the Hyuga and Uzumaki clans' heirs into the marriage or convince them to end it. By declaring the offending clan to be the oath breakers, this would lead to a breach of contract and the loss of honor for the clan. 2. The Hyuga clan will be permanently identified as traitors to the shinobi and clan code of Hai no Kuni if they use the caged bird seal on the wedding party, granting the ruling daimyo the authority to step in. Since the Uzumaki clan is prohibited from performing any seals on the marrying party, they are subject to the same penalties and sanctions. Any mind-altering seals are strictly prohibited, and the Iron Country and its ruler have the power to punish the person or clan that applies. 3. Any and all complaints must be settled in accordance with the Iron Country's and Hai no Kuni's joint ruling. 4. According to the respective clan leader's blood oath, the aforementioned terms are final and cannot be changed. The Sandame merely sighed and then carefully read the letter once more, ignoring the clauses pertaining to money return and other provisions in the event that the contract was not fulfilled for the following 10 generations. When the children turned 11, he pulled out a bottle of sake from Kumo that he had saved for this purpose. He then took a good gulp of the strong beverage and enjoyed the buzz of sake while thinking about the headache that would come when the daimyo and Lord Mifune from Iron Country came to check if the terms of the contract were being met. By this time, Sarutobi was mentally spent. One shocking revelation after another had been revealed by Hinata and Naruto. He felt ashamed when he thought about the blonde boy who lived in filth and ate from trash in the red light district before being moved to the shinobi apartments. He told his Anbu to call Danzo right away, sighing to himself because it seemed like he was doing that a lot. In his haste to act more in Konoha's best interests, it was time to rein in the War Hawk before he did something that would harm Konoha. Now, Kurenai Yuhi was with Hinata and Naruto in his apartment. Because Hinata herself had asked Kurenai to teach her specialty and because she wanted Naruto to have complete control over his chakra reservesa both because of his heritage as an Uzumaki and because he had a baiju sealed in Hima, Kurenai had made the decision to teach them both the fine art of genjutsu. Knowing Kushina Uzumaki, Kurenai felt obligated to teach Naruto the fine arts of genjutsu because she owed it to her, just as Kushina had taught her kenjutsu. Get ready, Naruto-san. I am going to introduce you to the practice of senbon balancing. I know you have already mastered that step, but still your chakra control is just at the level of a Junin. But these senbon are special and made from a special metal that needs a specified amount of chakra needed to lift them upwards. They were given to me by a very special kunoichi, your mother. She added special seals to the senbon that helped in chakra control for me. She wanted me to reach my potential and encouraged me by giving me tips. I want to give it to them for they are a part of your legacy. So do you like them? Asked while controlling her feelings how adorable he was without his. When she nodded and a faint smile appeared on her face, he went on, really Kurenai-san, were these senbon given to you by my mother? Then I am grateful for you to help me. I shall strive for you to feel proud of me because I shall strive to get better at genjutsu even though my chakra reserves are massive, nor shall I forget your instructions, he concluded by bowing deeply. Even though she had to pull up some strings and perform some manipulations, Hinata, who was watching the entire scene, was ecstatic that someone was providing good care. Since Danzo had been forcing his rude shinobi to follow her and eavesdrop on their training sessions, she also made the decision today to implement her plans involving him. She was aware that she would not be able to prevent him from pursuing his ambitions for power unless she reduced his influence or made Sandaime more aware of his behavior. Danzo and his belligerent tactics were unnecessary for Konoha because he would undoubtedly attempt to attack Naruto in order to use him as a weapon. That she would never permit to happen, not even in the slightest. Before she would permit her Naruto-kun to be transformed into a drone for the Warhawk, hell would pass. She would also attempt to persuade Sandaime to accompany Uzu on the trip the following week, or perhaps even guilt him into it. She had to test Edo Tensei on Hashirama, Madara, and Mito Uzumaki, so that was necessary. In order to obtain the Uzumaki's DNA, she also required Naruto to handle the Uzumaki's crypt sealing. Until then, she might be able to obtain some summonses for herself. The Hyuga clan's archives contain several taijutsu styles and secrets that were rarely used. There might be something there for her. Sarutobi Hiruzen was already at his wit's end regarding how to handle the training trip that Hinata Hyuga and Naruto Uzumaki had requested, which was to take place in the remote areas of Uzu no Kuni, a week after that fateful morning. He was unable to turn them away, though, because the letter made it apparent that a portion of their inheritance lay in that devastated nation and that the island was abandoned following the Uzumaki clan's devastation because no one had been able to escape the whirlpools that encircled it. All of the shinobi who had a hand in the jutsu had perished from chakra exhaustion, but Kiri itself had lost thousands of its invading force when they had temporarily stopped the whirlpools. Because Naruto was only half-blooded because his father was a Namikaze, he was concerned that these whirlpools would not accept him as an Uzumaki heir. On the basis of his faith, however, he merely chose to send Yuhi Kurenai and Enko Mitarashi with them on the 2-year-old training trip because they would both be helpful. Kurenai had a close relationship with both Hinata and Naruto, and Enko was already on Danzo's hit list because he still didn't trust her after Orochimaru left her. Enko was still stigmatized as a traitor, and she was already being shunned by a large number of civilians and a small number of shinobi. This enabled him to address two issues simultaneously. He gained access to both Naruto and Hinata as a result, and Enko received the much-needed closure she required. He asked his Anbu to fetch Enko and Kurenai as he grinned at the two kids as they entered. He laughed at the sardonic looks they both gave him and marveled inwardly at their shared perception that yes, he was a prodigy, because he used his crystal ball to keep an eye on them in their covert training. When Enko appeared to be her typical boisterous self and Kurenai in her Ice Queen form spoke, Hinata.san and Naruto.kun, they both are going to accompany both of you to Uzu no Kuni and will assist you in your training. I have faith in both of them and hope when you come back, you would be even better than you are now. Naruto.kun. I am sorry about the fact that the council and my teammates went behind my back and tried to erase the role of your clan in the village. I have taken steps to ensure it does not happen for any clan. I hope you do forgive me. It is not your fault, Gigi. Though I would be more concerned at the fact how easily the elders and the council jumped at the chance to become hypocrites. I hope when we return, things and situations will be different. You are a Hokage, so you must be strong and vigilant. That old mummy Danzo gives me the creeps, especially his covered eye. I always sense some kind of foul and twisted chakra from that eye. I hope you can see what tingles my senses whenever I pass by him. Replied Naruto, while surprising Sarutobi and Anko their capacity for detecting chakra and its variations. When someone was actively using the chakra, Hinata and Kurenai were both aware of his ability to gauge their mood just a little bit. However, when they discovered that one was repressing their chakra, Hinata asked him to use it actively. Naruto tested it on Danzo and was troubled by the sensation of chakra, and he informed both of them of his results. Since Kyuubi could easily sense the Mangekyo Sharingan because it was a corrupted form of chakra and twisted one's mind, making it impossible to resist its effects, Naruto was unaware that Hinata had asked him to do so. Long before Madara Uchiha attacked Konoha, he had succumbed to its infuriating effects. In a twisted way, it had made sense because Sasuke had also displayed an increase in his insanity after obtaining the Mangekyo through the murder of his brother Itachi, who admitted to Hinata that whenever he used his Mangekyo, he experienced a burning sensation in his eyes. Hinata had summoned him using Edo Tensei. Hinata came to the conclusion that long-term use of Mangekyo Sharingan harmed a person's mental health and sanity, especially for those who harbored feelings of greed, rage, or insanity. As a result of their strong emotional regulation, Itachi and Kakashi displayed no symptoms of harm even after consuming Mangekyo for extended periods of time. As the Sandaime Hokage handed them the signed papers granting them permission to depart Hai no Kuni, Hinata mentally shook herself and turned back to face him. Additionally, when Naruto was visiting them last week, he requested that they provide him with monthly reports so that he could share them with Hinata's father, Hiyashi, who had seized the opportunity to remove Hinata from the clan after she had attacked another main branch elder who had insulted both Naruto and Hinata's mother. Given that Hinata had obviously broken his ribs, arms, and left leg, the elder had barely made it through the match. The elder would now always walk with a limp, according to the doctors, and the Hyuga household was more tense as a result of this incident. Hiyashi had happily agreed that Hinata should go on a trip outside of the village in an attempt to defuse those tensions. Hiyashi had some serious concerns when the old letter surfaced, but the terms and the knowledge of the alliance by both Hai no Kuni and the Iron Country rulers had him on the verge of fainting. The letter contained severe terms and conditions, and the Hyuga clan would have to pay hell and face even greater shame if they violated even one of them. Hiyashi had been aware for some time that Hinata had selected Naruto as both a possible suitor and her husband. Since they were close friends in the academy, Hiyashi had approved of Minato's son despite the fact that his hands had been tied until she turned 12. He kept the letter from the Hyuga council and elders because many of them were outspoken critics of Naruto and he didn't want them to have any time to get ready for the shitstorm that would ensue once the news was made public. After 2 days, at the gate, Hinata and Naruto waited for Anko and Kurenai, their traveling companions, to arrive so they could begin their journey. They wore their traditional shinobi-era attire as usual. Naruto in his armor and Hinata in her kimono. The only addition was a big sealing scroll that they both carried on their backs. Hinata was beginning to believe that Anko was solely to blame for their 30-minute delay. Anko and Kurenai were hurrying through their apartment on the opposite side of the village, putting on their clothes and packing their belongings in the sealing scrolls, when Anko sneezed. Pulling her trench coat over her mesh shirt, she said, "Damn, I hope no one is talking about me. Especially, the brats, for I do not want them to think I am like Kakashi." She then turned to face Kurenai, who appeared somewhat extremely angry. "Anko, you and your impromptu parties. I did not want our impression to be this bad, especially when we are going to spend nearly 2 years with them. I don't know what they must be thinking right now. You're prepared? Then let's go." They both appeared in front of their 2 charges after disappearing in a shunshin. "I apologize." Kurenai, wearing a bandage dress and a crimson-red blouse wrapped in bandages, said, "We were late because..." She had long, curly black hair, cherry-red lipstick, and enough skin exposed to show that she was a pragmatic woman who understood exactly what kind of effect her appearance had on people, or men rather, and was willing to take advantage of it where she could. She was also adjusting her bandages on her chest area, giving all the males nearby nosebleeds. Additionally, it appeared that she preferred the color red. Under her bandages, there were crimson and scarlet hues, which were most noticeable on the left arm sleeve. Anko was dressed in her typical outfit, which included a mesh bodysuit and a short orange skirt that ended at her mid-thighs. Her usual trench coat was open, allowing everyone to see her chest and her bouncy, perky DD-size melons. Her purple hair was in a ponytail as usual. She was wearing gray arm and shin guards in addition to her outfit. She had a headband on her forehead, was eating a dango stick, and waved half-heartedly to them both before returning to her breakfast. Everyone raised their eyebrows when Naruto said, "You were lost on the road of life. I assumed that someone was copying Kakashi." He replied, "The only thing left was if they were lazy as hell and 2.5 hours more late." Kurenai sighed as she examined both of their appearances, particularly the large scrolls, and remarked to herself, "So they know Fuinjutsu. Let's leave. We all can talk on the way," she said while they all moved out. After getting the documents signed at the gate, they jumped into Tress and began their journey while Anko looked surprised at their grasp of tree jumping that was at least a genin-level skill in her eyes. Maybe this mission won't be boring at all, she thought to herself while scanning the area for hostiles. After reaching a respectable distance, Anko spoke, "What will the two brats learn from us? I simply want to know why Lord Third did not give us any particular directives or instructions for you two. Additionally, he appeared to believe that you two had a strategy for your training trip. If we are fortunate enough to arrive in Uzu, we will have 3 or possibly 4 teachers, so you won't need to teach us. We won't be in your hair for 2 years if you both leave us alone on the island. You are able to take a vacation. You seem to need one," Hinata said, arousing Anko and Kurenai's curiosity about the teacher. "What does that mean? Since Uzu was destroyed during the Second Shinobi War, no one has lived there," Kurenai said. "We won't abandon you, and even if someone is present, we would both like to meet them first." Anko nodded in agreement. When Hinata nodded and said, "Okay, but you two have to swear on your life, honor, and headband that you will not share this knowledge with anyone," Naruto turned to face her and sighed. "Until we say so, even with the Hokage, since it is a clan secret of the Uzumaki and Senju, it would be problematic for us if someone knew what we were doing and from whom we would be learning. Additionally, you can gain knowledge from them as a motivator. Those people are legends, and you will be surprised at what we know." He ended up raising the eyebrows of both of their babysitters, who appeared to be having trouble making up their minds, before Hinata said, "We can wait until we reach the seashores. You can decide on it until then, and then you can let us know." After traveling for 1.5 days, they arrived at the seashore. Kurenai and Anko were taken aback by Hinata's stamina because they only stopped twice during the journey, once for a rest and once for a night's sleep, but they suspected that because Naruto had the Kyuubi sealed inside him, he had enormous chakra reserves that gave him stamina that was nearly Junin to Anbu level. Seeing the question in both of their eyes, she shrugged and said, "I train with Naruto-kun every day. He also always outlives me." After reading in the Hyuga library that a great kunoichi should have better reserves and good chakra control, I began training to improve my reserves and control long before I even met him. I'll stop talking about myself. What have you decided? Are you here with us? We need to get to Uzu before the night officially begins, so we must move quickly. Kurenai nodded slowly as the two kunoichi turned to face one another. "All right, then." At this point, both of you spoke as one, saying, "We both swear on our life, honor, and our headbands that we will never reveal what you will show us, nor the identity of your teachers until you say so. We are with you on this, but remember that if we find something dangerous, we will bring both of you back regardless of your feelings for this. All right. Come on, let's see Uzu. Additionally, Kurenai. Sensei, your friend Anko-san, has an incentive." Both women's eyes widened in surprise as Hinata said, "If we are lucky, we might get that curse seal removed from her." Naruto stood atop a boat that he and his companions had rented, gazing out over the remains of the nation where his mother was born. The whirlpools that had shielded the island until its collapse were in front of him, ready to suck everything into them at the first sign of danger. The boat rocked with the tide, but remained anchored in place as his steely blue eyes watched the island and churning waters. With a knife at his side, he exited the boat and began to walk toward the destroyed island, the steel never leaving his eyes. Before anyone could say anything, Naruto yelled, "This will last till I am on the water," after cutting his palm as he reached the whirlpools and letting the blood fall into the water. At his insistence, the 3 of them left and started to cross the now calm ocean. "Cross quickly, and we will talk later." He and the others were able to move between the whirlpools because they had shrunk a little, but as soon as he was safely close to land, the whirling waters grew wider once more, preventing anyone from getting away. When viewed from above, the island of Uzu no Kuni is covered in forest on the outside, with brown and gray areas predominating in the center, and a river that runs through the center of the island. The area where Naruto and the others had landed was close to the river's mouth, which led to the main village, just like in Konoha, and he could hear animals every second, including wolves, deer, boars, and even the occasional rabbit and fox. The whirlpool started up again as soon as they were all on the Uzu no Kuni and Naruto got out of the water, causing him to fall to his knees and everyone to rush in his direction. I'm doing fine. I feel like I have only 25–30% of my chakra left after stopping whirlpools, which took a huge amount of it away. I now understand how those Kiri.nin perished during their attack on Uzu. Seals engraved on the seafloor are the cause of the whirlpools. Safe passage will only be possible with the freely given blood of an Uzumaki with its saturated chakra. The chakra cost was unusually high, even though the jutsu applied to the whirlpools may have reduced their speed. The fact that every single drop of chakra was extracted from those ninjas caused their deaths. He closed his eyes and ascended one of the few remaining walls as they got closer to the village, waiting to open them once he reached the summit. He and others were met with an unpalatable sight. A building reduced to rubble, with pillars tilting to the side, roofs collapsing, the bodies of Kumo, Kiri, and Iwa lying on the city's outer rings, and the bodies of his relatives close to the center, where a cage tower could be seen, but it was also partially destroyed, retaining only the two bottom floors. Naruto felt a great amount of sadness seeing the state of his homeland even though he was never born here. Hinata gripped his hand in a show of support and even Kurenai and Anko had tears in their eyes seeing the grim scene. With a muted pop, nearly 30 cage bunshin popped, each one having the same cold eyes as the original. They needed no instruction and moved quickly and efficiently through the destroyed village where they began gathering the bodies of Naruto's deceased clansmen so that they could be burned and their ashes buried in a mass grave. Anko and Kurenai themselves made 3 cage bunshin each so as to assist them in their grim work. The bodies of other ninjas were gathered so as to burn them and scatter their ashes. Few cage bunshin moved through the village and they scouted out few less damaged or still standing structures and also make them a campsite for the night, so that they would get some rest. Seeing the destruction was very heavy on Naruto who was already suffering from chakra loss and then emotional loss from seeing his dead kin. After a few hours during which Hinata did not leave his side, Naruto and his clones made a camp near the open square a few distance away from the fallen cage tower. They all ate in silence before going to bed so that they could wake up early the next day. Hinata and Naruto, as well as Anko and Kurenai, shared a tent and went to sleep together, reflecting on the dark and morbid aspects of what they had witnessed. They all fell asleep late at night, and their dreams were unsettling because more secrets were to be revealed the next day. The morning after Anko woke up to the wonderful smell of cooking breakfast and stretched herself, forgetting where she was at the time. Her actions caused Kurenai, her bedmate, to be rudely awakened from a very pleasant dream in which she was going on a date with a very attractive man. Kurenai, who was very grumpy, woke up to the sight of an almost nude Anko and her tits, which were restrained only by a very transparent and lacy looking purple bra, and her eyes followed their movement as her tits bounced with every movement. Anko stood up, giving Kurenai another view of her fantastic and toned body, her pert and round bulging ass cheeks snugly wrapped around her matching purple G-string of her mini thong, telling Kurenai that her friend preferred to sleep almost naked. Even though Anko had a more curvy and lush body, she had a grace and sway in her movements that attracted one's attention. Kurenai swallowed the lump that had formed in her throat and forced her eyes away from the luscious sight. Kurenai, it was a pleasure to sleep with you, but I never thought you were a cuddler. It was fascinating. When Anko's mental faculties returned, she said, now let's get up and have breakfast. Despite Kurenai staring at her, she did not mind because she was proud of her body and had worked hard to achieve such a lovely and sensual figure. Kurenai flushed, and after regulating her hormones, she gathered her day clothes and took off her nightgown. They both exited the tent they had shared the night before, where they saw Naruto and Hinata preparing breakfast over a small fire. They nodded and smiled at each other, and then they started to pour out bread, stew, and a cup of tea. After breakfast, they packed their camp and started to move toward the center of the square, where Naruto and Hinata had already made preparations for Edo Tensei, and more specifically, the fact that Hinata was aware of the plan a few weeks prior, and Naruto was thrilled to learn from such legendary people and his Uzumaki ancestor, Lady Mito herself. Hinata had obtained 3 live sacrifices and sealed them in the scroll using stasis seals. At this time, she was only using 3 sacrifices and preserving the other 2 bodies for future resurrections. The individuals she had abducted were among the most heinous and filthy people, as they were all criminals who, despite being civilians, were responsible for numerous rapes, murders, and other crimes in the red light district. Hinata had simply used a powerful sleeping gas and genjutsu to render them unconscious, and then sealed them after applying the restriction in stasis seals. Kurenai and Anko noticed a huge arrangement on the ground with 3 coffins lying in it. The first, second, and last coffins were all marked with the kanji for sealing. This is a kinjutsu technique that requires a great deal of knowledge and chakra to use flawlessly. Hinata said, "Since you are here, let's get started because we are wasting our time." Naruto just stood next to her and started pumping his chakra into her. The kunoichi watched as the young girl completed over 100 hand seals at a rate that was quick for someone her age and finally exclaimed, "Kinjustu! Edo Tensai!" As the kanji glowed and chakra poured out of her, the 3 coffins rattled as a fine dust or ash. Like substance poured into the coffins, and then everything was as quiet as a cemetery. The coffins slowly opened, revealing the figures inside, and the 2 figures in front of them caused the kunoichi to widen their eyes. They had no idea who the woman was, but she had the most menacing appearance of any person they had ever seen. You. What? How did? You, Hinata? Kurenai stammered, and Anko appeared to have frozen in disbelief at the legends in front of them. Meet the knowledgeable, strong people. If they agree, then our teachers. Meet the Shodaime and Nadaime Hokage, as well as Lady Mito, Senju Hashirama's wife. Hinata said in a stern and commanding tone, and Naruto appeared to be lost in thought as he stared at Lady Mito. Hokage Tower and Konoha, each of Danzo, Homura, and Kaharu appeared extremely tense as they stood in front of the Sarutobi Hiruzen. Actually, a chakra enhanced kunai could cut through the tension because it was so thick. Although the third Hokage appeared to be very composed, they had known Sarutobi for years and were familiar enough with his body language to recognize that he was anything but. It was exactly like the day Sarutobi discovered Naruto eating from trash cans outside the stores on his way to see Hinata. If one ignored Sarutobi's serene, almost relaxed demeanor, the expression in his eyes was essentially the same. Danzo was aware that a significant event had occurred. They had left the village with Junin Kurenai Yuhi and Special Junin Enko Midarashi, according to his rude shinobi, who he had dispatched to spy on the Jinchuriki and Hyuga heiress. He had cursed Hiruzen for letting Byakugan and the Kitsune no Kyuubi's Jinchuriki go outside, where they could have been abducted by any other secret village. But before he could think about the news anymore, he received a summons from the Anbu stating that Hokage had called him as soon as he got to the village. He was now waiting for Hiruzen to approach him so he could question him about his choices. "You know, it has been a very long time since we have been together. I may say it was for some good reason, but I can't say it was for that. Genma, your squad is needed, now," he yelled. Each of them felt the cool length of ANBU's ninjatus resting with their tips poised a hair's breadth from each of their necks and crackling with tightly leashed chakras poised to end their lives in an instant. 5 Anbu entered the room, 3 of them directly behind the elders. With a furious expression, Kaharu questioned, "What is the meaning of this, Hiruzen? Have you gone mad? Why are we being treated as criminals?" He unleashed his own chakra and ki at them, freezing everyone in their tracks as he said, "Enough. You will call me Hokage. Sama. I am no longer your friend. You all have crossed your limits years ago and make it abundantly clear that you had chosen your paths. But first, let me secure this office." He then went through a number of hand signals, the room darkened, and several ceiling arrays spread out before disappearing. Danzo swore at his own carelessness for being caught off guard and for being left defenseless here without his regular root guard. Nevertheless, he was taken aback by the strength and rage that Sarutobi seemed to be projecting, and he recalled why, following Hashirama Sama's passing, his former rival and friend was dubbed the Shinobi no Kami. "The thing is this, that you all have gone too far, and I have felt that it is better to rein in you fools before you bring down the wrath of the entire Shinobi continent on us and we are crushed. First, tell me, Homura, shall I kill your grandson Udon and your daughter-in-law for your stupidity? I seem to remember that is what you said when deleting the entire role of Uzumaki clan from the village academy and curriculum. Even the Uzumaki's clan no mask hall located on the outskirts of the village has been abandoned and never repaired. Explain this to me, Kaharu. You were made in charge of that duty a long time ago. And you, Danzo, I ought to simply seal your chakra, rip every memory out of your mind and then publicly execute you and your henchmen, Fu Yamanaka and Torun Aburame, shall I? Oh. Yes. I know. About your route, Fu and Torun, your stupid plans and your selling out S-rank secrets to the public about Naruto. Remember, the first and second chose me for this very reason." Danzo roared, "Damn you, Hiruzen. If only you had allowed me to do what I asked of you years ago, it could have been avoided." Homura and Kaharu paled and then hung their heads in shame, but the ninja holding him tightened their hold on the ninjutsu, cutting very thinly into the angry elder's skin. This simply stopped any further thought. Before the enthusiastic ninja removed his head, Danzo halted. Sarutobi just let out a sigh to himself before making up his mind and snapping his fingers. Hiruzen made a few hand gestures as soon as the two left members of the Anbu team appeared in front of him, but for all they knew, no one else understood what he was saying. Then he felt himself being pushed to his knees, while the other two ninjas just showed up, took up killing positions around him, and cut his robe. I already gave you a lot of leeway, Danzo, but no, I must do whatever I can to keep you from ruining the peace and plans I have for Konoha. This will be your punishment, and remember that what I am doing is for the good of Konoha. Prepare him, now, Hiruzen said in a chilly, menacing voice that made everyone shudder. Both elders were appalled at what their former teammate would do to his old friend and rival. They were concerned about what Hiruzen had in store for them after Danzo was finished, because this was not what they had anticipated when they woke up this morning. If that's the case, they couldn't even object because it would be ineffective, because Hiruzen's death certificate was signed by a furious person who appeared to have tightened control over them. Following an hour of vigorous Danzo sealing because of what Danzo had just forced upon him, Hiruzen detested him. This day would not have arrived if he had followed his student Jiraiya's advice a few years ago and just cracked down harder on Orochimaru and Danzo's dubious activities. He had ordered the caged bird seal variant to be woven with Danzo's spine's nerve endings on the small of his back, and he detested it. He detested, though not as much, the kill switches that were to be implanted on 3 different parts of his body while everyone watched him, as well as the seal that would be placed on the back of his tongue to prevent him from discussing village secrets. He detested Danzo's decision to go so far and become a virtual slave as a result. This is your punishment, Danzo. I am ordering you to tell me the entire operations of Root and your history with Orochimaru. Homura and Kaharu, you are not to speak of this to anyone. If you do, this is my decree for all of you. You all are going to be branded as traitors and your entire families killed, and their bodies will be scattered to the wind after being burnt to ash. Your records will be erased, as even the Fire Daimyo will be advised to issue a kill-on-sight order for you and your associates. The bingo books will carry S-rank, kill-on-sight orders. Your choice. I have, for too long, allowed you to dada you please, and I am sick of it. I am the Hokage and you will all refer to me as such. Though I am ashamed as what you all have done. And Danzo, if I find there were any other stupid actions you took after I finish interrogating Fu and Torun, you will pay with your blood. Am I clear? Hiruzen said with no emotion face. All of the Anbu had positioned themselves behind elders, with 2 of them on either side of Hiruzen. Even Danzo, who appeared to be in excruciating pain following the application of the seals, nodded. Your Root ninja will be given rehabilitation training, while their seals that inhibit their ability to speak and think freely will be removed. I will be personally overtaking the command of Root, and you will be introducing me to them. Though you will be their commander, but you will be reporting to me. I will be making sure of their loyalty to the village, and heaven help you, Danzo, if there are any children in the Black Ops. Now, that is over. Let's talk about your roles in allowing Uzumaki clan and the history of this village to be altered. Let's talk. He spoke, and the discussion started that would mold the future of Konoha. Uzu no Kuni, Uzu Shiobikure no Sato, as the 3 legendary ninjas emerged from their coffins and faced the people who had brought them back to life. There was silence in the Uzu no Kuni grounds. Before coming to the past, Hinata Hyuga had used the technique in the future, so she was well acquainted with its ins and outs. However, at that time, her chakra reserves were enormous and incredibly well managed. The chakra requirements of the technique were causing her body to feel extremely strained right now, so she was relieved that Naruto-kun was there to hold her while she called the people using Edo Tensai. One could argue that Kurenai and Anko were shocked. The 2 shinobi-era figures, who were well known for their strength and power, were standing in front of them. Both had served as their village's previous cages, and if they had read one another's histories, they would have been aware of the woman's strength and skill on the battlefield and in politics. Although the Kunoichi were more in awe than jealous, both women shuddered at the icy, elegant, and noble appearance that Mito Uzumaki was sporting. The woman looked as though she might rain hell on them at any time, and given her skill in Fuinjutsu, it was not out of the question that she would. Shodai. Sama and Nidame. Sama, it is an honor to meet you both, though we are sorry for not recognizing Mito Uzumaki due to the fact that the history of the Uzumaki clan was nearly wiped from the archives of the Konoha after the destruction of Uzu, and you can thank your copyright Danzo Shimura along with Sandame's ex teammates Kaharu and Homura for helping him to suppress the truth of Konoha's ties with Uzu. We are Kunoichi of Konoha Shinobi Forces, and my name is Kurenai Yuhi, while my companion is Anko Midarashi. She is a special Junin and works in torture and interrogation department. We are in the ruins of Uzu no Kuni for training 2 heirs of clans. They are Naruto Uzumaki and his childhood friend Hinata Hyuga. They both were the ones who summoned you, but we are at a loss at how they brought you back to life, as we know that you are dead. Spoke with Kurenai while suppressing her meeting the 2 of the most the Konoha. When she saw the dangerous ninjas in front of her, Anko was even worse, licking her lips. Even though it took some time, she was able to identify the woman right away from the photos that Kushina-sensei had shown her when she had visited her to learn Kenjutsu. The renowned Mito Uzumaki. Senju, the wife of first Hokage Hashirama Senju, was standing in front of them. She was the most skilled user of Fuinjutsu in her era, far superior to the Ondaime, Sandame, Jiraiya, and even Kushina Uzumaki. Her eyes moistened a little at the prospect of finally being free of the snake bastard who had destroyed her life, and she suddenly remembered what Hinata had said before coming here. That perhaps someone could take off her curse seal. It was difficult for Mito Uzumaki to be taken by surprise. At the age of 120, she slept in her bed and the last thing she recalled was the sweet release of freedom. She recalled a dazzling light, followed by nothing. She had experienced a pull a few moments prior, followed by a suffocating sensation, as though she had been placed inside a tiny box, which vanished as soon as it arrived. The box turned out to be a coffin when the door opened, and her astute eyes noticed the seals inscribed on the coffin. Additionally, she noticed that her husband and his brother were with her, and since they were supposed to be dead, she realized right away that something was wrong. Like her, they appeared somewhat perplexed by their sudden awakening, but she caught a glimpse of Tobarama's realization before he resigned himself and schooled his features. As soon as she opened her eyes, she noticed a strange group of two attractive young women in their late teens or early 20s standing in front of her. She relaxed when she saw Tama, a Hyuga girl, and a boy with blue eyes and bright blonde hair wearing Konoha headbands. As soon as those eyes met hers, she saw a range of emotions, including hurt, hope, sadness, and pain. She discovered that he had a very familiar source of chakra, albeit one that appeared to be diminished and incomplete, when her emotion sensing ability came into play. The idea that the boy in front of her was a Jinchuriki and that she was the first container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune sent her mind into overdrive. However, he didn't resemble an Uzumaki, so it couldn't be. The idea of Konoha erasing her clan's history with the village and eliminating their roles made her hands clench during the introductions. Because of her negative emotion sensing, she was able to detect the spike in anger, and she knew that both her brother and her husband were itching for her to go to Konoha and unleash hell on Sarutobi and the others. She opened her mouth to say, but her husband interrupted, saying, "It appears that we have been brought back to reality because I recall dying on the battlefield during the first Shinobi War. How was life after I died, Tobarama and Mito? Did the village stay stable? I died after I was attacked by Hanzo of AIM. He betrayed me and attacked me after I had been attacked by the Kumo forces. I helped my team to escape and was severely weakened. It led to my defeat. Though I can understand, it was foolish of me to believe that Hanzo would not take advantage of the fact due to the pact we had made, but he was rather ruthless and cunning." Tobarama Senju spoke. "You cannot discuss ruthlessness because you are the one who essentially invented it for your own purposes. Your battle tactics demonstrate that you are a very vicious and intimidating opponent, exploiting any weakness in your opponent's defenses to attack them ruthlessly and strategically when they are weak." Anko and Kurenai gave Naruto a startled look when he said, "It appears that you recognize the technique used to bring you back. How can you not, since you were the one who created it in the first place?" "Yes, I recognize it, but I'm surprised that you were able to perform an Edo Tensai. I sense a great chakra in you. You are the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, aren't you, and at least a half-blooded Uzumaki. Also, you have minute traces of Senju chakra in you. But I think we all want to ask how a child can know a Kenjutsu and perform it without flinching. You know the requirements for the jutsu, a living sacrifice. How does a child know about this technique that was sealed in the Forbidden Scroll? And don't even consider lying to me." He gave them a command while leaking a small portion of his killing intent, making both Kunoichi look alarmed at the realization that a sacrifice was required for the Kinjutsu. However, before they could respond, Naruto calmly responded, "You can switch off your intimidation tactics, Lord Second, because it was the only way that we both could talk to you about several things. All of them are important for the coming future, but it would be better if less persons know about it. So if Lady Uzumaki would be so kind to raise a barrier between our teachers and you that would block all sound and sight, it would be beneficial to us all. And please, Anko-san and Kurenai-sensei, do not attempt to say otherwise. We will discuss about jutsu and its requirements later," Naruto concluded with a stern voice. As she raised a Fuinjutsu barrier that blocked sight and sound and made a covert sweep for any bugs or summons that could be used for spying, Mito Uzumaki said, "Yes. Both Hashi-kun and I would like to know more about the village and its state and also how you possess the Kyuubi. What happened to Kushina and our family? And what do you mean about the coming conflicts in the future?" "Sorry Naruto-kun, but I think that you are not ready for this talk right now," Hinata said apologetically as she slowly lowered him to the ground, startling the summons of the undead but causing them to relax at her words. In an instant, she had moved behind Naruto and used her Jukengan for a blow that instantly knocked him out. Gomen sighed, but it was necessary, for he is not ready for what I am going to tell you all. My name is Hinata Hyuga and I am using the contact Lady Mito and my great-grandfather cooked up to save myself from the barbarian rule of the Hyuga elders, and I love Naruto-kun with all my heart. Though I look like I'm only 8 years old, but it is not true. My mental age is close to being 40 years old, and that is due to the fact that, she said when she was interrupted. Because you traveled back in time. Don't look so surprised, because it was one of my fancy and unfinished ideas that were based on the things that Mito's father showed me. I assume that my diary was lost and you found the research for the jutsu and finished the incomplete Uzumaki technique. I had planned to go back and change the way my fight ended with Madara, but fate had other plans for me. If you don't mind me asking how many years it took for you to complete the jutsu? A cheerful looking Hashirama said, ignoring Tobarama's face palming and Mito muttering some unpleasant things that she was going to do to her baka of a husband if she had the time. As the three of them listened to Hinata's story about the terrible future that lay ahead if they were not prepared, she said, nearly 10 years Shodem. Sama, but please listen what I have to say and the reason I came back. She described Madara Uchiha's survival following his battle with the first Hokage and his insane Moon Eye plan. She described Akatsuki and their objectives, the Kyuubi's attack on the village of Konoha and the reason why the Kushina seal failed. The way Naruto was treated in the village prior to her meeting and bringing him along. Orochimaru's insane quest for immortality, Sarutobi's failure to kill him, and Danzo's schemes involving Root Shinobi. Among many other things, such as the massacre of the Uchiha clan and its veracity, and the attack on Konoha during the Chunin exams. She specifically discussed Madara's involvement in the Fourth Shinobi War, Naruto's demise, and the reasons behind her return to the past. At the end of the day, all three were wearing somber expressions of the troubled and chaotic future that lay ahead. You mentioned the Uchihas were wiped out, and you say that I am responsible for it. Can you tell me how and why? Tobarama said before anyone else could continue to express their concerns. However, many of the policies and jutsu you developed ended up causing problems later on. Danzo believes, and I know you also believe, that the rebellious elements bearing Madara's will would always be smoldering in the Uchiha clan. Lord Second, you were primarily responsible for establishing Konoha's organizational system during your reign. You established various organizations such as the Academy, the Anbu, the Chunin exams, and the Konoha military police force, the latter of which you created as a sign of trust towards the Uchiha who made up the majority of that organization. However, you are the one who drove the Uchiha to it, Lord Second. It could be argued that the seeds were sown with the Uchiha police force you established. People who enforce the law are frequently disliked, and the more power a group has, the more arrogant it can become. You shamefully pushed them out of the village, next to the prison, on the grounds that you were keeping a close eye on the criminals. Hinata responded, that is a matter which is not important right now, unflinching at the glare and power surrounding Naidame Hokage. A few members of the Uchiha clan would later come to believe that this was just an elaborate way to ostracize them from the village and its government. This led them to secretly follow Madara Uchiha's will and be massacred decades later after plotting to stage a coup d'état. Mito said, Tobarama, please calm down now. I understand your worries and I am even more worried about what the future holds for my descendant. He has already experienced such pain at a young age and will be hunted later in his life. However, I want to thank you on his behalf for taking him under your care. I hope you will continue to help him, and I have decided that I will help him to best of my abilities. Mito then turned to face Hashirama and Tobarama, who both started to perspire under her insane appearance, and said, and these two will also help all of you in the training for the next 2 years. Won't you Hashi-kun and Tobi-chan? With a very excited Tobarama nodding like a bobblehead, a sweating Hashirama said, yes. E will help. Say it, Tobarama, won't you? Hinata exhaled a sigh of relief as the nauseating aura vanished. She went to Naruto and woke him up by applying her knowledge. The first thing that came to mind when Naruto woke up was, mind telling me how I have this killer headache, Hinata-chan? He asked, his frosted smile, which was just a slight lip quirk but worked perfectly for him. She blushed and wondered in silence when she would see his big, foxy smile again. Hinata begged with her eyes, I told you everything, didn't I? Anyo. Naruto-kun. You were so excited that you slipped and cracked your head on the pavement and became unconscious for 2 hours. I discussed everything with them and they have decided to help us in our minders. Oh. I forgot about them. Lady Mito, will you please drop the barrier? I will have to calm them about the Kinjutsu and maybe you can help us. Lady Mito could sense the turmoil inside the young Hyuga heiress, so she pleaded. Lady Mito made a ram hand seal and said, "Yes, you did. Now let us drop the barrier and tell them what we have decided for you all." Fuin Kai. What the hell, you old hag, couldn't you warn us that you were going to take that much time? We were waiting for many hours, SS. Anko growled at Mito as she trailed off as a huge and horrible key descended upon them as the red barrier surrounding them collapsed and Kurenai and Anko hurried towards them. In front of her, Lady Mito appeared prepared to strike her, and behind her, she had a dreadful aura that resembled an Oni, as if it were about to rain hell on them. She was a frightening sight because the sky had grown darker and storm clouds were raging behind her. Lady Mito yelled, "What did you call me just now? Let me just tell you I am not old." Got it, child? Hashirama and Tobarama were shocked by the Uzumaki woman's loss of self-control and her fiery, irate temper. When the woman, who was clearly bipolar, smiled sweetly at them, everyone flinched, putting them all on edge. The smile that sent chills down everyone's spines was not one of, "I'm glad to see you smile," but rather one that looked more like, "I'm going to skin you alive and then pour salt and acids on your bare skin." Her look was so crazed and insane that Anko thought she had just signed her death certificate. When Hinata reacted, she started to perspire, and Kurenai and Naruto gave her a look that made her feel a little anxious. The girl's expression was one of admiration and a healthy dose of hero worship as she gazed at Lady Mito. Anko apologized to everyone after shuddering at the sense of disruption in the natural order of things. It didn't seem like the woman was kidding, and Kurenai and Anko both nodded at her glare right away. "It is all right. Now we have decided to train you all but only on certain conditions that are as follows. Break them and we will kill you and dump your bodies in the sea as fish food. Got it or not?" Naruto appeared amused, but it was difficult to tell because of his expression. "Oh, right. Now for the requirements and guidelines. The guidelines are straightforward. Don't be late. We, as your teachers, must always be treated with the utmost respect, as must your companions during formal events. No one is permitted to attempt to convince someone else to stay. Training uniforms will be provided to you tomorrow and will be worn at all times except for sleeping and bathing. No grievances. Be prepared for the unexpected. You can train anyone you think deserving after your training is over, but you have to accept accountability for their behavior. Lastly, as we want to keep this technique a secret, you must never disclose the location of the place or the source of your training. You will all lie, even if that old monkey Saru Chan asks. The reason for this is that I will tell you all later. I want an oath on that, on your blood and your headband. She said bravely, burn these rules into your memory and never forget them. Write them down if you must, but you will be governed by them as long as you are here, after which you are free to make your own decisions. They all said, "Hi Shisho," and then they all recited the oath. Good, she replied with a grin on her lips. Now, the guidelines we are about to give you is for your benefit and following them will help you greatly in your training, so pay close attention and feel free to ask for clarification on anything when my husband is done. With differing levels of excitement, they all nodded their heads at the possibility of finally starting their training under the renowned ninjas. Moving ahead of them, Hashirama spoke in his own calming tone. Take everything one step at a time, have patience with yourself and rest when you are supposed to rest, and he became serious, and most importantly never let your emotions guide you, let them strengthen you and motivate you, but a decision made solely on emotions such as hate, anger, jealousy, greed and vengeance is a poor decision and in the end will only lead to suffering. Hinata experienced a sudden wave of sadness. She was deeply affected by the Hokage's words because she was familiar with what he was discussing. Kurenai was the first to speak this time. Now that has been said, remember it and hold fast to it. Are there any questions? When we will begin our training, sensei, and for how long will we be under your care? This time Tobarama, who had been standing in the corner, straightened and then spoke. 2 days after today at the dawn of the first ray of light, we will begin our training and it will run for nearly 5 years. Do not worry, for Hinata had told us that we have only 2 years. Fortunately for us, Lady Mito will be opening a special training chamber in Uzu, which was sealed by her before she came to Konoha. It was a project that she lost interest in, but she completed it and sealed it away for the future use of Uzumaki clan. The chamber can slow down time and we can adjust the chamber setting so that the next 1.5 years will be equal to 5 years. But remember that you will also age accordingly inside. Outside the time may be 1.5 years, but you will lose 5 years of your life. Tell me, do you find this acceptable? When they all nodded, he went on. Okay, then you all get your supplies and we will get food for the time frame in our sealing scrolls. Lady Mito will unseal the chamber and repair any damage that has been done to it. My elder brother will help you in making a monument for the fallen Uzumaki brethren and also help in the repairs for the village. Don't worry, for it is our way of atoning for the failure of the village not helping its allies." He sighed and then looked out towards the ruins of the buildings of the village that was once home to one of the most feared clans in the elemental nations. Everyone who was there went about their assigned tasks, and soon the town square was deserted save for a rabbit or a bird. After 2 days the 7 of them stood before the caverns beneath Uzu, which had been concealed with the help of seals and a number of genjutsu techniques. There were numerous traps and other security seals along the entire pathway. Lady Mito had spent the previous 2 days cleaning the entire island with Hashirama and Tobarama. The island's security seals had been activated, and the trees from Hashirama's Mokuton had filled the entire island. The entire tree was kept within the limits of the village. It was done in order to eliminate the invasion marks that were left on the land in the cover up of the Battle of Uzu. In addition, he planted a massive tree as a memorial to the Uzumakis who had died. Since they were summoned to make Uzu habitable again and to serve as a base of operations, the last 2 days were undoubtedly the busiest for the living. Lady Mito went through a number of hand signals so quickly that they were all essentially a blur, even to Kurenai and Anko. The cavern wall trembled as a number of seals appeared and then quickly vanished, one after the other. When a section of the wall abruptly disappeared into thin air and a path was illuminated by torches burning all along it, everyone appeared excited to see such advanced fuinjutsu. People were strangely alarmed by her words, "Follow me and keep to the path. And please don't go on anywhere without anyone with you or you might get lost forever." However, nobody paid attention to the faint smirk that was adorning the corner of her mouth. The 7-person group was moving through the caverns when all of a sudden there was a ripple of movement that engulfed them all, and they found themselves walking on a lush plain with verdant grass and vegetation. The abrupt change in scenery caused everyone's eyes to widen, with the exception of Mito. Then, both Hashirama and Tobarama tensed up and gave Lady Mito a disbelieving look that was full of wonder and terror. "Is this a summoning plane? You discovered or built a whole summon plane by yourself, Mito. I am so proud. I got a real ass-kicking wife of mine who knows what her stuff." Hashirama's blushing wife immediately slapped her on the head, glancing not at her friends but everywhere else. Yes, this was a summoning plane for an ancient creature called Kraken, but it died many thousand years ago. My Uzumaki ancestors found this plane and began experimenting to try to become sages here. However, one of them was more interested in making this plane a perfect training ground, and he created several seals to change this plane. It is located in a pocket dimension accessible only by a certain path that we took located underneath the land of Uzu. I managed to create a time seal on this plane that allows me to manipulate time with respect to the real world, but the only drawback is that our bodies age like we would have if we spent time in the real world. Whatever we need, this plane can become, and don't take it as an illusion. It is very real. The seals created by my ancestor change the landscape by manipulating the seals, and all we have to do is know the correct sequence to do so. This is our training ground and we will begin it from now. Get ready, for this is the last time to back out. After this there is no turning back," spoke Lady Mito. In real time, Naruto, Hinata, Anko, and Kurenai all nodded gravely, and with a final hand seal, the cavern closed, keeping the people inside for the next 1.5 years, but it was going to be a long and difficult 5 years beneath the ninjas who were once considered legends in their era. For the next 5 years, all 3 of the ninjas who had not died were keeping an eye on their 4 pupils. This period of time was sufficient to turn them into respectable ninjas from the past. According to what they had discovered, the ninjas' standards had drastically declined. Junin was today's equivalent of the elite genin of the warring era. All of this resulted from the ninjas of this generation becoming complacent after years of phony peace, which is why they were massacred during the 4th Shinobi War. They needed to change this mindset, and they would, by God's grace. Hashirama left the Mokuton house he had built using his bloodline after saying, "Now follow me outside so that we can begin, and do not keep me waiting." After 45 minutes, the 4 students were finally outside, but it took them 15 minutes to get to their feet because of the resistance and gravity seals that Lady Mito had placed on their bodies. Their complexity and intricacies made them more challenging to work with. "Now that you are finally here, start running and don't stop till I tell you to stop," Tobarama stated. "I need to see where I need to start with you." They ran non-stop all morning until they all started to pass out from exhaustion one by one. After 7 kilometers of running, Naruto finally came to a crashing stop. With the exception of Kurenai and Hinata, who were unable to travel more than 2 kilometers, they had traveled a distance that would be regarded as appropriate for a genin. "Alright, meditate for 15 minutes, and when you're done I will teach you how to conceal weapons so you don't have to go about with that pouch and holster all the time." Lady Mito replied quietly, "And I have already taken the liberty of burning your weapons pouch and holsters." Following their meditation, she started giving a demonstration of how to conceal weapons. She instructed, "Now you try," as she caused a whole box of senbon, 30 kunai, 50 shuriken, a pair of kamas, a pair of sei, a short sword, and 2 fuma shuriken to disappear back into her clothing. After pulling a scroll from beneath her kimono, she unfolded it and revealed an arsenal that was 3 times as large as what she was carrying at the time. The fact that all of the weapons were composed of chakra metal was their best feature. She sighed to herself as she observed their odd and amazed expressions. She and her generation of shinobi were taught these small tricks, and they didn't care about it. It made it impossible to have one's weapons confiscated and to be unarmed even after being apprehended. She frequently pondered how much the academy and the village had devolved in recent years. After learning how to hide weapons, Naruto and the others were given a meal consisting of rice, fish, and vegetables later that day. Now that you have learnt the art of concealing weapons, I must increase the level of this art. For now these are your weapons. In Uzu, we were given these grade of weapons in our clan house after we learnt to be dangerous with the training weapons, but before we were not even allowed to touch the metal. So taking that in mind, I will teach you all to be deadly with nothing but a pair of chopsticks, paper, or even your food. Lady Mito said, while others appeared appropriately frightened or amazed in the case of Hinata. Then she unsealed their new weapons and removed their metal ones. Anko had pouted a little about giving up the weapons, but after giving Mito Sama a key enhanced glare, she essentially handed over all of her armor. The new weapons were amusing because they were all constructed from construction paper. These are your new weapons, and until you are able to use them like real weapons you are forbidden to use real ones, she said as she looked at her 3 pupils, reason being, a ninja must be able to make anything in his hands a deadly weapon from a stick to a peanut, as I want you all to be. Now start concealing these weapons. When I return there must be nothing left in your piles and I must not see any unusual bulges. However, she hesitated before entering the house. Before she vanished in the doorway, she said, enjoy this freedom while it lasts, because tomorrow your new life truly begins and your old life ends. We will forge you to be the best, and that is our promise to the world. And don't bend them. When you get the hang of this you may wash up, eat, and rest. Your mental training begins tomorrow, she said as she started to leave. They all went back to their common room after supper and were instructed to take a shower before they could sleep side by side on futons. They were all locked in the room by their senseis, who explained that it was for their own benefit and that they needed to stop being distracted by the bodies of people of the opposite gender. They also said that Naruto was fortunate to be receiving such excellent training and that he needed to mature and stop acting like a child, but that he would eventually get used to it. Even though they eventually grew used to seeing such sights, Anko continued to tease people with her body. She even reached for Naruto's crotch before smiling mischievously at Hinata, who gave her a fierce look. Kurenai frequently made an effort to avoid staring at Anko like a carcass. The worst was poor Naruto. Every female body resembled a dream goddess to him. Anko had turned redder than a tomato from his groping. He had just made an effort to suppress the emotions that rose in his stomach when he saw attractive women in the nude. Once they were comfortable, Tobarama entered and showed them the 3 charts that were displayed on the ceiling of their bedroom. One of the charts showed the effects of pressure points, which included death, paralysis, and unconsciousness. The other chart showed the effects of striking points. Memorize each and every one of these points and their effects, as well as combining consecutive pressure points or striking points. Make them second nature to you. He then departed, leaving 3 exhausted students to diligently memorize the charts while they stared at the ceiling. He smiled to himself because he knew that tomorrow would mark the start of real hell for these adorable little pupils. The day after, it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and our 4 ninjas.in training were all cozy and contented on their futons, dreaming happily, when a stream of freezing water hit them, startling them out of their sleep because they weren't used to the cold water. Lady Mito and Tobarama nodded as he lowered his hand, indicating that he was in charge of their spontaneous bath. You have 20 minutes to get ready and eat breakfast, after that meet me behind the house. After that, they vanished into the room's shadows. They all complied, albeit grudgingly, as they quickly showered, changed into their training clothes, and ate breakfast. However, they soon became ill after seeing what their sensei had prepared for them in the back of the house. Although there was a lake to the right and the back of the house resembled a forest that grew darker the farther you looked, that was not the reason for their unexpected illness. The rear of the house resembled a scene from a war film, but with many more functional traps. The obstacle course began with a 12-foot wall, a pole of comparable height, and a single 50-foot ninja wire fastened to the top of the wall. More poles were strewn about in various heights from there, leading to the lake, and from the lake, thin slabs of sheeting plywood or cardboard were arranged in an arc on the surface, leading back to the land where rows of swinging blades awaited them. From there, they had to pass through a jungle of ribbons and soft materials, with a second 12-foot wall with a board on a stand at the other end. Not to mention that everything had bells on it. The things they could see were the scariest thing. Tobirama cleared his throat to attract their attention as they gazed at the torture machine with wide eyes. Before you begin, first warm up by stretching, then do 50 push-ups, 75 sit-ups and a 5-kilometer jog. Get going, he yelled. Although it sounded like a warm-up to some, it felt more like running up a mountain while carrying a heavy slab of stone on your body when you are not used to wearing seals and wearing a weighted suit that adds 50 pounds to your body and resists every movement you make. They completed their warm-up 2 hours later. The only ninja with the least amount of stamina, Kurenai, was crying because Lady Mito had all but forced them to finish, and she didn't give up despite being taunted, mocked, and denigrated at random points along the way. Naruto wasn't sure how much farther he could go, and Hinata and Anko weren't sure how they made it. Tobirama was explaining their assignment, torture, or whatever you want to call it, while everyone was sleeping. Firstly, I forbid the use chakra in this exercise, which appeared to cut off Naruto's yacht. You must scale the wall. Move across the tight wire while killing or incapacitating the hidden targets. If you don't, they attack back. Hop from pole to pole without falling while dodging the weapons we will be throwing at you. Next, you run across the sheets on the lake and kill or incapacitate the targets in the boat without falling in. Make it through the blades without getting sliced up and through the ribbons and sheet without disturbing it. Go over the second wall and land on the board without breaking it or making a sound. Sadly, it didn't stop there. All 4 of the students were now as pale as ghosts. Oh, if hear a bell, the sound of the foil, I see the ribbon or sheets move or you get hit by a weapon, you start over immediately, and you will do this every day except Sunday until you can do the entire course in 30 seconds or less. His smile was almost sadistic. Hey, no need to worry, this is only level 1. Oh, by the way, and no bloodline ability. Begin. Summoning Plane, Uzumaki Training Area, Uzu no Kuni, Uzu Shiogakure no Sato. After boarding the training aircraft, 2 months. For their ninjutsu training, Naruto and the others were positioned in front of Lord Hashirama. It had been a terrible 2 weeks for the 4 ninjas. Training. Both Anko and Kurenai had been devastated to learn that their teachers, who had denigrated them and their senseis back in the village for inadequate training, didn't care about their hard-won talents. Lady Mito had questioned Naruto and the girls about their first kills and seduction training. The elder Kunoichi received harsh criticism for ignoring their all-around training, but Hinata and Naruto received her approval for taking the rabbit test when they were younger. Kurenai received additional instruction on honing her taijutsu and ninjutsu skills, with an emphasis on enhancing her chakra control and endurance through the use of more precise techniques for those exercises. Anko, on the other hand, had received criticism for her inadequate seduction training and, according to Tobirama Sensei, mediocre taijutsu, which used a subpar snake style and only mediocre ninjutsu abilities. The dismissal of her abilities, particularly those she had worked so hard to hone after Orochimaru abandoned her, had easily damaged Anko's pride and ego. After testing both of them for hentaijutsu and seduction techniques, Lady Mito informed her that they were terrible at their best and that they needed to learn the fundamentals again. She offered to teach them all, including Hinata and Naruto, but after a month of training, they required improved chakra control and physical conditioning in order to learn them. They were expected to learn how to use their elemental chakra and ninjutsu from Lord Hashirama today. The most unexpected of them all, Naruto had 3 primary affinities: earth, water, and lightning, as well as a medium affinity for wind and fire, according to their elemental tests. Lady Mito speculated that with a lot of practice, Naruto might eventually be able to use Mokuton. Hinata had a very weak affinity for fire and a medium affinity for earth. Her 2 primary affinities were water and lightning. Kurenai shocked everyone by having 2 primary affinities for fire and wind and medium affinities for lightning and water, while Anko had 2 primary affinities for fire and earth and a minor affinity for wind. Out of all the elements, Earth Chakra is the most dangerous and the hardest to master. Lord Hashirama started to say, but was cut off when Anko couldn't hide her laughter at the idea. Let me guess, like most others, you thought that because there was no obvious benefit, like cutting or burning, you thought Earth Chakra was useless, am I right? He said, letting out a sigh before gaining another one from Kurenai and Anko's stupid nods. The initial Hokage began to explain. First and foremost, Earth Chakra is possibly the most versatile chakra. While we who have Earth natures cannot cut like wind, burn like fire, shock like lightning, or flow like water, we have several things to our advantage. This time, Hashirama snorted at his students' ignorance, saying, but Earth is considered the weakest element after water, After all, the earth nature control exercises are the easiest to master, even if you have an opposing element. Wrong. What most people don't seem to realize is that it's damn near impossible to master an element. The first two exercises are to master manipulating an element. There is a third and a fourth exercise that are a great deal harder. For example, Earth's third exercise is to be mastered using iron. Once I finally finish teaching you that, you'll be able to make weapons in the middle of battle, your jutsu will be so much stronger, and other benefits. They were all taken aback, having never known about these. After all, I suppose it wasn't their fault. All of them stared at him, wondering why he would say, Earth's fourth element seems damn near impossible to me, seeing as I do not have a bloodline related to it. They had only been taught the fundamentals, and those were also very different from what we had been taught. For most of Earth's techniques, one needs to be calm, cool, and collected. This set of techniques brings out the heat in everyone. Once even I complete the fourth exercise, I will be able to use lava, which unfortunately I was never able to due to the wars and conflicts. Everyone felt like they had been struck in the stomachs. For a brief moment, their eyes glowed with anticipation, and Hashirama grinned to himself in his head. Admittedly, I will never have the control over it that someone with a bloodline would, but that won't really matter with lava now, will it? Once all four exercises are mastered, something that takes several lifetimes, mind you, only then can someone claim mastery over an element. However, I'm getting off topic. Earth jutsu, when used correctly, are more defensive in nature than offensive. In fact, even the more offensive ones are best used to counter-attack, such as the Hell Zone Rock Shard or Stone Spear. Also, to make up for this, we have a multitude of the more offensive, dragons, type jutsu, such as Mud Dragon Bullet, Earth Dragon Blast, Earth Dragon God Blast, and the most powerful Lava Dragon Explosion technique. Everyone was spinning their heads. 4 of those jutsu had never even been heard of. With a simple sigh, Hashirama pulled out a kunai. He threw it into a tree after charging it with Doden Chakra. Everyone's eyes followed the kunai, widening in surprise as the wood exploded away from the kunai and left a huge dent in the tree instead of penetrating as it should have. Now, for channeling Earth Chakra into weapons, it can do one of two things, like wind can either cut or penetrate. The first, as you saw, would cause an explosive amount of blunt force trauma, the amount one is able to channel depending on the person's skill and the weapon use. Like kunai caused that, whereas a senbon would only break a bone. Break a tooth? Just. Kurenai and Anko were starting to feel guilty about not trying out the different chakra natures. Wait to form the Earth Chakra? Hashirama appeared irritated by the interruption. The second choice, depending on the way you form the Earth Chakra, Alosa. Yes, formed. You do know the two types of jutsu? The ones where you can channel a set amount of chakra and then let it go, and the other one where you have to channel a continuous amount of chakra for the entire duration of the jutsu? Same principle? Anko gave a sympathetic nod. This one takes up more chakra to use, but that's not much of a problem for me. With continuous channeling of Earth Chakra, well, I'm not really sure how to describe it. Basically, the penetrating power is increased because of added weight to the weapon. I'm not sure how it works, or just how the extra weight doesn't affect the throw or stab, but there are still a lot of things I don't know. Besides that, Earth Jutsus are used to control the battlefield. If I have the time to use the jutsu, in an area I'm not afraid of modifying, I can control the entire pace and pattern of whatever fight I am in. Finished Hashirama. Anko thought he was a fool. She actually thought that the majority of shinobi were stupid. Chakra has so many uses, and it seems like they have only just begun to explore them. Naruto questioned, how did you learn all this lore first? I learned some of it in a few books I found. And the rest of it I learned from experimenting. I even used my clones for that, so there is no reason for people not to know this. The training started after the statement, well, let's get started. After 2 weeks in a remote area of the training aircraft, Naruto and Hinata stood by themselves with Hashirama-sensei. After completing the earth manipulation exercises this morning, he had asked these two to come with him. Because he was using almost 300 kage bunshin to extend the duration of a single exercise, Naruto had made significant progress in this area and chakra control. Since they all had a psychic connection to the original, Tobirama-sensei had explained to him that the kage bunshin no jutsu could be used for a variety of chakra exercises. He even forced him to practice the technique until he could perform it without the hand seals. At this point, he was practicing making the clones appear without the puff of smoke or stopping his motions to focus on doing so. The following chakra control exercises had been completed by him and Hinata, and their senseis were particularly impressed by how quickly they had mastered control. Method of leaf balancing. Advanced method for leaf balancing. Exercise method for tree walking. Advanced exercise method for tree walking. Exercise method for water walking. Advanced techniques for swimming and water walking. Exercise method for chakra armor. Exercises for chakra. Enhanced muscles and senses. They were now anticipating Hashirama Sensei's explanation for keeping them apart from other people. In its most basic and pure form, chakra seeks balance, pushes and pulls, in and out, yin and yang. This is the principle that underpins the world and keeps it running. In my meditations, I have discovered that this is where the greatest potential for shinobi lies. By using what I like to refer to as true chakra, a human can unlock a newfound power and untapped potential. The problem is that humans have developed elemental affinities through repeated use of jutsu over time, so that a person develops a fondness for a particular element and uses it throughout their life, which causes elemental chakra to accumulate within the body and becomes a trait that is passed down to any offspring. I surmise that this is also the source of those abilities that are specific to bloodlines. It is a great loss because true chakra can be so easily tainted and difficult to store within the body, but its effects and benefits are astounding. I found that it greatly enhances the physical being, leading to an increase of overall performance, strength, speed, stamina, and superior senses. However, elemental affinity is both a blessing and a curse because it gives way to techniques of respective affinity while also converting true chakra into elemental chakra. I've also discovered that it boosts growth, even when a person is well into their prime. It also significantly slows down the aging process, as evidenced by the fact that, at 30.6, I look barely 25, and if I survive a natural death, I think that the lifespan of humans will also be greatly extended. I speculate that the Uzumaki clan may have a hidden reservoir of true chakra in their bodies, which accounts for their extraordinary vitality and unusually long lifespan. A true chakra can only be unlocked by intense meditation and excellent chakra control. The process is similar to that of senjutsu, but instead of requiring an open mind to commune with nature, true chakra can only be found by turning one's sight inward. The body's chakra must be refined by having it circulate through the body at rapid speeds in fine and highly compressed waves. This is extremely dangerous because if it is not done with the proper amount of control, the body will be torn to shred from the inside and will undoubtedly result in death. The elemental chakra will be forced out of the body after 2 hours of circulation. Slowly stop the chakra circulation and let it spread to all of the body's cells. Once the body is saturated, keep meditating and let the body gradually adjust to the true chakra. After a few days of repetition and the body has grown accustomed to it, you can seal the true chakra within your body so that you can use it in battle without worrying that it will be tainted by elemental chakra. Hashirama concluded by turning back to his two spell-bound students. Before assuming what they referred to as his teacher mode, he grinned at their looks. Now you too will be learning to harmonize the true chakra in your body. I believe that your young age will help you in getting more benefits from it. I will help you in doing this along every day for the next week or so, and until I say so, do not attempt to teach the others. It is very imperative, for this will allow you an ace in the coming conflicts in the future. Both of them nodded and sat on their knees to train. Before glancing at the horizon and noticing the storm clouds accumulating at the far end of the aircraft, Hashirama grinned at their excitement. Before he too became absorbed in his students' training, he wished them strength in his mind. After 2 years summoning plane, Uzumaki training area. Uzu no Kuni, Uzushiogakure no Sato, the 4 shinobi in training had an extremely interesting 2 years. In what their deceased instructors called light and daily training, they had endured hell and other unimaginable torments. Although Kurenai had become a skilled assassin in the ways of the Uzumaki clan, both Anko and Kurenai had received extremely thorough training in the areas they lacked. After learning that the Yuhi clan was primarily made up of assassins and that, in contrast to most kunoichi, the Yuhi clan was predominantly composed of women during the Warring Clans era when they lived in the whirlpool before relocating to Konoha, she had vowed to serve the Uzumaki clan and Naruto. They had adopted kunoichi's more devious course. They were the epitome of deceit and seduction. They would stab you in the back with a dagger while embracing you tenderly. They also had a clan secret kinjutsu that made their salvia turn poisonous. Learning this technique required a lot of control and training, and as a result, they were considered to be among the most dangerous assassins. Kurenai now possessed amazing control over her abilities, enabling her to manipulate the poison so that she could kill a man with a single kiss. As the Uzumaki clan's main retainers, Yuhi frequently served as their clan's covert operative in the village. Her mother would have started Kurenai's training when she was 12 years old, but she lost her family in the Kyuubi attack and her home was destroyed. However, she had fully accepted her heritage and was now aware of it. Lady Mito, who was left in Uzu and knew a number of the scrolls and journals of the former heads of the Yuhi clan, had finished her training in hentai jutsu and seduction. Under Tobarama Sensei and Lady Mito, she had completed her elemental manipulations of fire and wind, was working on lightning, and was about to start manipulating water. After achieving Anbu capacity, her next objectives were to reduce her chakra capacity from her current high Junin level to a low Sanin level. She was able to use a number of genjutsu, including the Temple of Nirvana technique, without assistance and with just 1/3 hand seal for 3 times the original duration because her chakra control had advanced to elite Anbu level. She even learned the Bringer of Darkness genjutsu from the Tobarama, but she was only able to defeat half of the hand seals. Over the next 3 years, she hoped to be able to use her elements with just a single hand seal and use 2 elements at once while using single hand seals with both hands. She had learned the Yuhi clan's secret taijutsu, which was very hard to use because it required a very nimble and flexible body. It was more like a dance in which she could strike the opponent's muscles, nerves, and even blood circulation system with daggers, kunai, senbon, and even chakra scalpels. Although she was now at a mid-Junin level in taijutsu, she needed to use any chakra nature in her strikes to cripple the opponent in order to become proficient in the style. However, during her training, Anko had also had her curse seal removed within a year. After the seal was broken, her chakra levels had risen to the mid-Cage level, but her control over them had been severely damaged. She abused Cage Bunshin to the point where she was able to control chakras at the mid-Sanin level. She could easily earn over 30 in less than 45, but she couldn't make hundreds like Naruto. She also needed to exercise caution because, unlike Naruto, who had a tailed beast sealed inside him to care for him, her mind could not handle the shock of 12 or more clones being dispelled at once. She received scrolls on the true snake style, and it was discovered that her body elastic technique was very helpful in assisting with the style's katas. Her movements were timed by the stylist to target key areas. The style focused on incapacitating and killing through the weakest parts of the human body, including punches that targeted the head's temples, tensile fingers with long fingernails that attempted to gouge out eyes, strikes aimed at pressure and tenketsu points, grasping, cobra, like lunges at the esophagus to tear apart the delicate organ, and kicks that flew towards the crotch or savagely damaged ligaments. In order to enhance her earth nature, she also learned the Goken's taijutsu style. She was very skilled at using earth chakra in her strikes to break the enemy's defense. After finishing her 2 primary affinities, fire and earth, Anko had lowered the number of hand seals to 5 or 4, allowing her to use any technique. She could use half the hand seals to unleash her jutsu because of her minor affinity for wind. Her objective for the following 3 years was the same as Kurenai's. Reach a stage where she can use her elements with just a single hand seal, execute collaboration jutsus, and use 2 elements at once while using single hand seals with both hands. Lady Mito, a kenjutsu master comparable to the Kiri's swordsman like Kushina Uzumaki in her era, had also taught her how to use a katana and a tanto at the same time. She had studied kenjutsu from Kushina Uzumaki, but she was unable to master the entire style after her passing. However, she was pushed to insane heights here, and at this point, she could confidently state that she could easily handle Genma Shiranui and Yugao Azuki, the 2 most prominent kenjutsu practitioners in Konoha. She had even received praise from Hashirama Sensei for using 2 weapons at once. She also received training from Kurenai in the arts of hentaijutsu and seduction, but she discovered that torture and interrogation were her true callings. Her senseis wanted her to excel in her field of ninja arts, so they gave her a number of books on the subject. She was very skilled and had acquired a lot of arts and techniques related to torture. However, Anko's covert training had a number of unforeseen consequences. She took Lady Mito's initiative to establish a rapport with them after observing how her summons had regarded her. Luckily for her, the majority of the snakes were preparing a coup under the direction of the new snake summons leader since they had grown weary of Manda's capricious control over them. She was informed that the coup would not be completed until the end of the following year, and she had been asked not to use summoning until then because it was interfering with their schedule. Since she was not specifically involved in the coup, only her personal summons under the name Amy were permitted. Hinata Hyuga had not anticipated how drastically her life would change when she summoned these 3 using the Edo Tensai. In Lady Mito's words, she was nothing like the women she had gotten the impression of from their talks who were more interested in bishonen-looking boys and going on diets and other rubbish. She was now a fully fledged kunoichi. Hinata's chakra control was at high Junin level, and her chakra capacity was at mid-Junin level. She was skilled in the 2 primary affinities of lightning and water, and her manipulation had only completed the water affinities. With the exception of those with levels above a rank and higher, she was now able to use the majority of her water jutsu with a single hand seal after being thoroughly trained by Tobirama Sensei. She had an Anbu level affinity for lightning, and her hand seals were down to around 1. Third, she and Naruto attempted to learn seal less ninjutsu, but their attempts were unsuccessful because the jutsu became unstable before being used. Her very slight affinity for fire was on par with Junin's, and her medium affinity for earth had advanced to the point where she could cut the hand seals in half. She even shared Anko, Kurenai, and Naruto's objectives for ninjutsu over the following 3 years. Reach a stage where she can use her elements with just a single hand seal, execute collaboration jutsus, and use 2 elements at once while using single hand seals with both hands. One of the hardest and most frustrating times she had ever experienced was during her taijutsu training. Although each of the 3 instructors contributed ideas and suggestions for her taijutsu, she shared with them the future style she had developed. After she demonstrated the style, they agreed to reform it, but they also urged her to learn other styles and even gave her praise for defying the Hyuga custom of only using Jayuken. She had started using a modified form of Jayuken, which was less rigid than the traditional version but took into account her limber and lithe body, and she had learned Goken using the same principles as Anko. She also learned the snake style that Anko had learned, but she incorporated those stances into her own taijutsu style that she had later developed because she had not affiliated herself with the snake summons and had no plans to do so. She referred to this style as the Raging River style, which combined stances from Jayuken, dances of the Kagaya clan, and many other styles to create a hybrid style that used the same principles as the Yuhi clan taijutsu to injure the enemy with weapons and chakra scalpels. The main difference was that Hinata's taijutsu was more akin to flowing water, whereas the Yuhi clan employed dance-like movements. Last but not least, Naruto had developed the most, and even then, he had advanced significantly. He had received instruction in a number of chakra control techniques, and as of right now, he had completed the following. Method of leaf balancing, advanced method for leaf balancing. Exercise method for tree walking, advanced exercise method for tree walking. Exercise method for water walking, advanced techniques for swimming and water walking. Exercise method for chakra armor, exercises for chakra enhanced muscles and senses. The chakra pulse method, the advanced version of the chakra pulse technique, is called chakra sonar. Technique for rapid river walking, the kanai balancing method. Improved kanai balancing method, technique for waterfall walking exercise. Improve your waterfall walking and swimming skills. Quick river exercise. Swimming and walking, the senbon balancing method. Advanced method for senbon balancing, advanced exercise method for chakra armor. Both his chakra control and chakra capacity were at the mid-cage level. Given that he employed at least 100 kage bunshin for these exercises and that his chakra capacity resulted from his ancestry as a Jinchuriki and Uzumaki, it was a true accomplishment for Naruto. After 5 years of training, Hashirama had predicted that Naruto would have reserves at the Baiju level because of the Kyuubi. He had received tutoring in every subject, including the following: Shuriken Jutsu, politics, strategies and tactics. Deceit, body language, interrogation and torture. Emotional and chakra sensing, use of several weapons. Hentai jutsu, seduction, as well as numerous other fields. Every night, Naruto was worn out, and the Kyuubi's ability to regenerate was the only thing that kept him fresh for the following day. At his teacher's insistence, he had studied 5 different forms of taijutsu. These included Lady Mito's water fist style, Hashirama's personal taijutsu style, the Goken, snake style, and hummingbird style. He was currently learning Tobirama's lightning fist style, and he planned to learn the Hinata's rendition of Juken as well. He was making good progress with his elemental manipulation and ninjutsu. His ability to launch their jutsus with a single hand seal allowed him to master his 3 primary affinities of earth, water, and lightninga until he attained a rank jutsus. In order to use the justus effectively, he needed at least 1/3 hand seal above the A rank. Otherwise, his attacks would have used more chakra than was necessary. He had reduced the requirement for hand seals to half of its initial limit and had a medium affinity for wind and fire at the mid-Anbu level. He had been able to learn how to make his jutsu more effective in less time consuming by using a number of tips from his dead teachers and the Uzumaki journals. Additionally, his genjutsu training was going well until he got to the A rank ones, and using it in the middle of a battle required focus and time. He could use them with ease up until B ranks, but after that, he was essentially worthless in genjutsu casting battles. He was able to identify and neutralize several A rank genjutsus and even a few S rank ones, though. The use of medical procedures to implant the DNA of Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju into Naruto's body in order to give him more power was the subject of a heated debate between Hinata and Tobirama at the time. Using the DNA of Naruto, Senju Hashirama, and Uchiha Madara, Hinata had theorized and even shown them multiple scrolls that contained the experiments she had successfully tested later. Since he was also a thorough researcher and would use other people's bodies to better understand their abilities and perhaps create new ones, all she wanted was their confirmation of how the procedure would be carried out. One instance of this occurred in Uchiha, where Tobirama gained knowledge of the Sharingan's internal mechanisms. Tobirama gained some medical knowledge as a result, and Hinata wanted all of them to oversee the procedure. Hashirama was also included in the operation's oversight because of her ability to use medical ninjutsu, which allowed her to heal without creating seals. Hashirama had consented, but only if Naruto and all of the teachers would voluntarily accept the suggestion. Lady Mito remained silent about the matter and continued to discuss the procedure's specifics without saying anything. According to Tobirama, Naruto would not be able to integrate both DNAs, and even if he could, would he have any chance of becoming Sharingan? Who would teach Naruto about the powers of the aforementioned eyes if he were to manifest Sharingan? They would know how to counter those eyes and their effects, but they would also know how to use them like a Sharingan master. Madara Uchiha. Just like I did for you, I have his DNA and can use Edo Tensai to revive him, but in the future when he was revived he looked closer to his prime age and strength. However, I have modified the seals a bit and given them to Lady Mito for cross-checking. If she says okay, we can revive Madara but with his memories up to the part in his life before you fought and he went rogue. It is the only way. I know Lord Second that you were wary of him, but Naruto knows instruction in the arts of Sharingan from the master of those eyes, and it is Madara and no one else. Tobirama agreed with Hinata. Okay, but let us check what your experiments and findings show. Lady Mito, are the seals that Hinata has modified as in working order or not? Tobirama inquired to Lady Mito. Yes, for a few things, but I will change that. Also, the findings of the experiments are written from her future self's memory. I would like to do these tests again with fresh samples. It is fine by you, Hinata. Because according to these reports that we are going to have Naruto as weak as a Chunin for the 3 months after the operation, and that is with taking Kyuubi into the account. She responded with a nod of acceptance. Okay then, it is decided. Till the next week we shall go over the reports and do the experiments, and we shall do the operation if everything goes as planned. Till then, Hinata-san, you can return to the training. We will meet next week. Finished Hashirama and closed the meeting. While Hinata returned to where Naruto and the others were practicing ninjutsu and kenjutsu, the 3 living teachers sat down to talk. 1 week later, Summoning Plain, Uzumaki Training Area. Uzu no Kuni, Uzushiogakure no Sato. Naruto was waiting by himself in a room for Hinata and his immortal teachers to arrive. After that, he would have to go through medical procedures to have the DNA of his arch rival Madara Uchiha and first Hokage Hashirama Senju implanted in his body. A week prior, Hinata had taken him aside and thoroughly explained her plan and how she intended to carry out the procedure. Naruto ultimately agreed to have the surgery, but he had inquired as to whether there would be any unforeseen consequences from the entire process. He had been reassured by Lady Mito and Lord Second that nothing similar would occur, and they had examined the entire process. Even the likelihood that he would awaken the Sharingan was less than 40%, according to Tobirama's calculations. Although Naruto did not agree with Tobirama's assessment, he was extremely relieved that he would not turn into a red-eyed, hungry bastard. Before the massacre, the Uchiha had been one of his primary tormentors. They even permitted drunks and bystanders to hurt him, and when he defended himself, they would attempt to place the blame for the chaos on him. Despite realizing the necessity of the operation, Naruto was a little anxious because he would be extremely weak for the next 3 months and would then be trained by Edo Tensai Madara Uchiha. That Madara who, over a set of principles, betrayed Konoha and his childhood friend and rival Hashirama. Even Kyuubi would growl and become enraged in the seal at the mention of Uchiha's name, and Naruto was always aware that Madara had instilled in Tobirama an unhealthy fear of him. But one has to make sacrifices for the small good that comes out of a bad picture, as Hashirama stated. Hinata and his resurrected teachers entered the room as the door opened. Although they all appeared somewhat gloomy, what they were trying was risky and had never been done before. There were significant differences between theory and practice, even though the tests and calculations might have matched on paper. While Lady Mito prepared a sedative for him during the procedure, Naruto nodded and lay on the table. After that, he only knew that the darkness would never end. 8 weeks following the procedure. Summoning Plain, Uzumaki Training Area. Kushwas. Edo Tensai no Jutsu, was the cry that Hinata let out as she completed the final hand seal and put her hand down. The seals on it in the ground glowed brightly as the coffin in front of her, which bore the kanji of Uchiha, glowed with a brilliant white light. Prior to everything stopping, the coffin trembled as a fine dust or ash-like substance poured into it. When this heavily altered and extremely restrictive Edo Tensei was completed, Hinata gasped. She was prepared to collapse to near chakra exhaustion even after that much training. Her gaze wandered to the enormous sealing scroll that lay open at her feet on the ground. When they discovered that Hinata would die of chakra exhaustion if she tried to use the variant of the impure world resurrection of Madara without using Naruto to supply her chakra, Lady Mito came up with this masterpiece. The chakra required to fully power a cage for 2S rank battles was contained in this chakra storage and release scroll. After she used the technique, it was obviously completed, and she was happy that Lady Mito had offered such a great solution to her issue. When Hinata saw the same red samurai armor that had been worn over the body of the resurrected Madara, she forced back a shudder as the coffin opened. She resisted the urge to approach the ancient Uchiha and use every weapon at her disposal to destroy him. It seems that I have been summoned back to the living and by a Hyuga brat no less. Clearly something is very wrong with the picture as she should not be able to use such a technique and even I don't remember dying. You girl tell me where am I? Madara responded. Hearing the Uchiha leader speak in the same haughty manner as she remembered from the war, Hinata clenched her hands in a desperate attempt to keep herself in check. Hashirama stepped in and brought Tobirama and Lady Mito with him. It seems that you have not been fully revived, Madara. I seem to remember that you would sense me immediately if I had been within a few miles of your location. Tell me, was your betrayal your own action or an act done in rage and anger? He asked. When he heard the voice, Madara tensed up and spun around to confront the speaker. His face twisted into a face of anger and insanity, and he almost leapt to beat the person he thought had betrayed him. After struggling to stop himself, he listened to what his rival had to say. When he realized what Hashirama had said, he turned around and gave the Hyuga, who had the gall to call him back from the dead and then take away half of his abilities, a furious glare. The sweet smile on Lady Mito's face sent shivers down the spines of all the men in attendance. Don't, Madara. We have to talk to for a bit. I had thought that you died at the Valley of the End, but how managed to trick me I don't know. What I now want is that you are going to help us, and if don't help us, we will. I'm sorry, I will make it so. Madara perspired a little. He was aware that the insane woman must be planning something. Even after he had called forth the Kyuubi in the battle, he was aware that Mito's love for the woman played a significant role in Hashirama's victory over him. The woman was renowned for having the best fuinjutsu skills in the world, which was quite an accomplishment. He said in a somber tone that made Tobirama twitch a little. Okay, then, but I must ask why and for whom you need my help. I will not lower myself to help you without you all keeping me in the dark. Tell me and I will answer you on my honor as a Uchiha. After Lady Mito let out a sigh, Hashirama took the stage and gave his erstwhile friend a brief rundown of the situation. After a lengthy 2-hour explanation, Hashirama concluded, and then perspiration fell when he saw Madara on the verge of fainting. And that is why we had chosen you to help us. When he looked more closely, he saw that Madara and the others had swirls in their eyes. He also wondered why Tobi-kun and his adorable little pupil Hinata were sleeping. Madara appeared to be prepared to use Kaiden Jutsu as she was now frothing at the mouth. Madara Uchiha was unaware of how he had gotten pregnant with Hashirama while he was still living. Or perhaps his death had only made him more obnoxious. He was prepared to train Naruto Uzumaki, and if he was telling the truth, he was quite eager to see what would happen if the pupil he was training eventually encountered his most powerful self. Hashirama had assured him that he would not recall this instance of his future resurrection. Yes, he was convinced to take on a student despite the fact that he would have to share him with Lady Mito and be responsible for teaching 3 other brats Kaiden Ninjutsu and fire elemental training. After successfully training his student, Madara Uchiha, who loved a good fight, was eager to dance with him. He could possibly teach him some of his Uchiha customs and his own art, of which he was a master. Although he had left the clan when he left the village, the boy, who was at least 1/4 Uchiha, had actually been betrayed by his clansmen first. He was going to make amends with Hashirama first, though. In order to properly train the boy, he also needed to persuade them to give him more authority. After all, if his recollections were correct, he may have failed in leaving behind this one, which was what he had always desired to do. Like Hashirama and Mito, he wished to leave his own legacy, and it appeared that he had made the same decision as the young Naruto Uzumaki. After 2 years, real-time world, the 2 individuals known to others as the Eternal Chunin, Azumo and Katetsu, were chatting among themselves while standing at the gates because they were tired of their never-ending guard duty. After a week of intense rain, which was unusual for this time of year but not unusual in the fire country, the day was clear. When Izumo mentioned a woman he had spoken to at the bar last night, Kotetsu gave him glares that suggested he was about to beat his partner. The reason for this was that the woman was actually their former teammate, who had joined the Anbu after retiring after 7 years and becoming a chunin. Even after pursuing her for 4 years, Kotetsu never had the courage to pop the question to the woman he had a huge crush on. Izumo appeared to have scored with the brunette based on the way he was speaking. When Izumo noticed that his partner was focusing on something else, he said, "The way she was moving and her legs were so graceful, Kotetsu, you should have seen her, man. Hey, you listening to me, Kotetsu or not?" He looked back to see what had captured his partner's attention. With their black cloaks and face masks, 4 figures that appeared to be Anbu were seen racing towards the Konoha gates. However, Izumo recalled that no Anbu teams, including the Root, had been deployed, and no missions had been distributed. Therefore, whoever these were, they were either from another village or were fakes. Abruptly, a group of Anbu stood in front of the gates, creating a circle around the booths that would allow the approaching individuals to enter. Without even appearing to pause, the figures proceeded towards the Hokage Tower as soon as they entered through the gate. One of them, a female with a very muscular body, threw a scroll at the Anbu leader. The sight of the official scroll bearing the Hokage's insignia had calmed the Anbu. The others quickly fled to follow them, but the speed of the individuals who had entered the village was not less than high Anbu level. Team fall back. They are 2 Leaf Shinobi with their students back from a sanctioned training trip. Move towards the village east to continue perimeter. Bore out, the captain said as he handed the scroll to Kotetsu after reading it. After reading the scroll, Izumo asked his partner, who appeared to be about to pass out, whose names were on the scroll: Kotetsu, Yuhi Kurenai, Mitarashi Anko, Hyuga Hinata, and Uzumaki. Senju Naruto, Kotetsu said in an oddly croaked voice after an awkward silence of about a minute. Izumo choked on something invisible as he heard Senju mouth the sentence to his partner, who nodded and looked very sick before beaming mischievously and holding out his hand and saying, "You owe me 5,000 yen. I won the bet. Pay up now, Kotetsu." Izumo nodded and began humming a song. "So, did you see the legs on the 2 women, huh, Kotetsu?" he asked after a while. Kotetsu glared at his friend and said, "Not now. In the evening when we are free of this duty." "Stop talking, Izumo," Kotetsu retorted in annoyance. Sarutobi Hiruzen was not a ninja who was easily taken by surprise. He regained control of the village with iron hands after dealing with his longtime rival and friend Danzo and getting his act together. Konoha flourished under his leadership once more. After realizing how much their pointless agenda had been harming the village, even his former teammates Kaharu and Homura had come out in full support of him. He had altered the ninjas' routines and made a number of adjustments to their way of life. The civilian council's influence was the only thing he had not been able to completely control. Even though they were able to maintain some degree of authority, it was enough to give him headaches when they deliberately caused issues for the military. Sarutobi looked proudly as his most capable and trusted soldiers stood in front of him. All of them were Danzo's Root Shinobi, who he now commanded. Following 3 to 6 months of overcoming their seals and robotic tendencies, Root Shinobi were granted entry into the village. It was challenging, and he even needed to call on Jiraiya for assistance. However, he was unable to dispute Danzo's command structure and training effectiveness. He cleared his throat. The entire Anbu waited for his orders while standing at attention. He grinned to himself inwardly. These days, Konoha's hierarchy is based on respect, order, and discipline. There was no way to get around the direct chain of command. As of now, we have 4 persons in Anbu attire that passed the gates this morning. As Bohr told me and as the scroll suggests, there are some persons that were sent on a private training by me. They have yet to report to me till now, but that should not allow you to panic. However, I have gotten some intelligence from them that was dropped this very morning by a hawk. Teams 5, 8 and 10 are to be deployed at the borders of Iwa. There are reports of a mercenary group working there under the Tsuchikage. It is reported the ninjas are of S rank. I want to know about their movements and their plans. No engagement with them. This a recon-only mission. I want all of you to put in a good amount of effort. Am I clear? Hi, Hokage. Sama, a chorus of voices said simultaneously. In a cloud of smoke, the Anbu disappeared, before saying, as if speaking into thin air, "I know you are there. Why do you linger in the shadows?" Sarutobi grinned to himself and reclined in his chair. 4 figures that were said to have passed the gates in the morning were visible as the air in the office rippled around. Hiruzen was no novice in the sensory ninjutsu, and both of the eternal chunins had reported on the pressure they appeared to have sensed when these 4 had passed the gate. He sensed that all 4 figures had strong and powerful chakra when they abandoned their camouflage technique. From high level to almost mid-cage or S level, they conveyed an overall impression of seasoned ninja. He was astounded because he had never anticipated these 4's potential to grow or increase to this extent. Not that he didn't believe in any of them, but he hadn't anticipated their growth to the point where they were all elite Junin or higher. He sensed that all of the chakra were tightly controlled and appeared to be restrained, but he was positive that they had all advanced to the mid-Anbu level, especially after 2 years of training. He mentally noted that the village would benefit greatly from knowing about the training. He could not see any distinguishing characteristics of them, though, because they were all wearing dark black cloaks with their hoods up. He thought he had seen the cloaks before, but he was unable to identify where they had come from. As he glanced again, he was struck by how the cloaks seemed to absorb the light from the surrounding area, intensifying the shadows and giving the impression that their shadows had been incorporated into the cloaks. He was suddenly struck by a vivid memory of his early adolescence spent with his teachers, Lord Hashirama and Lord Tobarama, and Lady Mito. Shadow cloaks? He asked incredulously. Lady Mito's grandfather, a skilled seal master and a gifted scientist and inventor, personally designed these cloaks. Together with his summons of the Karasu, Crow, clan, he had created a masterpiece of cloaks using seals and the molted feathers of the crows to create a literal camouflage cloth that could mimic the surroundings with the help of the seals, the user's chakra, and their will. However, the reason they were named shadow cloaks was not because of that, but rather because the person wearing them could actually drop them into their own shadow or any kind of shadow, just like the Nara clan could do with a lot of practice. This very cloak actually inspired the Nara clan's hiding in the shadows technique, which calls for extreme focus and control. In order to make these cloaks nearly silent and impervious to all forms of detection, multiple seals were concealed within them. The seals had been deactivated because Hiruzen had used his sensory technique to detect them. It has been a while, hasn't it? Naruto.kun, Hinata.san, Anko.san and Kurenai.san. Can you remove the hoods, please? I would like to see what changes have happened to you all over a period of 2 years that you all were away from the village. I can sense the chakra flowing inside you and can honestly say that I have been surprised by the growth all of you have out there. As they all took off their hoods and masks, a man with a voice as cold as the dead of winter said, "It seems that you live up to your name of the professor, old man. It is nice to see you too." Sarutobi Hiruzen was an excellent character judge who could infer a lot about a person simply by observing them. Their faces appeared to have been carved by angels themselves, and Naruto in particular had grown incredibly attractive and handsome. They exuded a sense of grace and regality in their movements, features, and even how they now carried themselves, as if they were all members of some kind of royal family or nobility. He was shocked by what he saw when he finally caught a glimpse of Naruto's eyes. His eyes glowed darkly in the cool air like twin ships of ice, cold indigo. Although it was said that a man's eyes are windows to his soul, he was unable to read anything in his pseudo-grandchild's eyes. They were severe and protective, showing nothing of the boy's innermost feelings. Only emptiness, a void, stretched out in front of him, threatening to engulf him in its icy clutches. The blonde, who was now cold and airy, watched him and the Anbu with noticeable indifference. It seemed as though he didn't care about anything in the universe. Behind those icy, menacing blue eyes, he observed the world, liking nothing and missing nothing. Sarutobi was reminded of Itachi by the blonde child in many ways. However, he noticed a slight change. It appeared as though the third Hokage could tell immediately that Naruto was someone he should avoid. Though the spikes were noticeably muted, the boy's blonde hair resembled that of his own father. Even though he was still young, his face was already starting to look handsome, and his grandchild would be a real heartthrob in a few years. A stunning, exotic woman who appeared to be a living example of divine art was standing next to Naruto. Creamy white skin and dark, full-bodied black hair with a lovely curl. She had a figure more akin to those in fashion magazines. Her long legs accentuate her eyes and, of course, her already opulent curves. Her eyes were a brilliant ruby red. Sarutobi had no idea that Kurenai could become even more stunning, but this woman would destroy his kunoichi's female pride. He took care to avoid sending her on any missions involving female nobles because he did not want a feud to break out between the noble women who were envious of her exotic beauty. Anko, who had light brown eyes and violet hair in a short ponytail, was standing next to Kurenai, looking exactly the same. She had on a tan trench coat, a mesh suit, a miniskirt, and a pair of shin guards. An additional change had occurred. Hiruzen was taken aback to discover that her chakra was free of the curse mark's taint. "It appears that you have lost your mark. Haven't you, Anko?" he said, glancing at her. "Yes. The process was long and painful, but it was removed in the end." I will explain it to you later. But I have to warn you, don't tell anyone about it, for I don't want Orochimaru knowing about it and attacking me on how I managed to get it off me. When he attacks me the next time, I will not be helpless and would take good care of him, she replied with a boisterous tone while laughing to her lips. Hiruzen smiled at that and watched the behavior in his mind with the girl who used to shout the news from the top of the Hokage monument while dancing. I suppose the journey has matured them. However, Naruto's lifeless, icy gaze is the only thing that worries me. He reflected, I'll ask him about the trip later. The Sandane was startled out of his reverie by Hinata's voice. Hokage. Sama, Naruto.kun and I would like to ask you about the Uzumaki's clan no mask hall located on the outskirts of the village, which has been abandoned. Since the mask hall is a part of the Uzumaki clan heritage, we would like to get the deeds for the forest area around the radius of 5 kilometers from the temple. We both have decided to create a clan compound with the temple as the base. I know that such things that need permission from the daimyo and we both have gotten it while coming here to Konoha. Widening his eyes in disbelief and showing a sense of humor. Hiruzen was completely preoccupied with military issues and the disappearance of multiple ninjas from the elemental nations, particularly in the rice country. He had a suspicion that Orochimaru, a former pupil and leaf trader, was involved. He had received additional alarming reports that the Tsuchikage were acquiring more weapons and expanding the academy's curriculum. With the Mizukage declaring war on his people and bloodlines being put to death, Kiri had descended into civil war. With the foreign front in constant turmoil, he had no time to deal with the headaches back home. Okay, but I will first check the deeds. Also, your father Hiyashi-san has talked with the fire daimyo and gave both of you his blessings even though the elders of your clan, especially your grandfather, raised quite a fuss over it. However, seeing the scroll and the signatures of your ancestor made them all shut up and the terms were quite enough to make them steam. However, there is a message from Hiyashi which is, the white lotus is free but the vultures do not like the swirl. I hope you understand what he was talking about. On the other hand, Hanabi has been made the heiress after your departure. The elders of your clan wasted no time in trying to demand that on your return, you would be branded with the caged seal. This situation nearly resulted in a civil war in your clan, but the fire daimyo was informed of the situation along with Lord Mifune. 2 of the elders were executed on charges of treason and other were given a fair warning resulting in your victory. Anko and Kurenai both grinned as Naruto nodded. Hinata burst out laughing into her sleeve. Lord Daimyo had told us about that when we visited him. Here, this scroll details all the information you want, while this second scroll here contains all the formalities for the land transfer. You might want to know that we are going to use heavy ninjutsu for remodeling, so ask your village barrier team to keep the barrier protection to the maximum. Also, I might use that chakra so the warning is in advance. We don't want the panic of October 10 to appear again. Naruto spoke as he handed over 2 scrolls. When heavy ninjutsu and Kyuubi's chakra were mentioned, Sarutobi narrowed his eyes, but he decided it would be best to ask now. They had all just returned from intense training, so they would undoubtedly need to take a break. The remaining queries might be postponed until the following meeting. Additionally, he had to assess Naruto and Hinata's training outcomes. He spoke his thoughts and Anko replied, Lord Hokage, we both would rate these 2 as elite Junin in almost all the fields of shinobi, but we can offer you a better deal. Why don't we test our students against a team of Anbusei 2 days afterwards? Till then we can wash off the tiredness and also create the clan compound. Also, I would like to ask you the permission of being Naruto's guardian. Kurenai wants to take Hinata under her wing. I hope you understand that we have formed nice bonds while we were away and consider the request. Sarutobi Hiruzen reviewed Anko's suggestion and nodded to himself. This was beneficial because he had always wanted someone to watch over Hinata and Naruto, but the civilian council's meddling prevented him from doing so. This was a great chance for him, now that he considered it. Okay. But I will give you the decision 2 days later. Now go and have a nice day. It was nice seeing you all. Especially you Naruto-kun. Maybe someday we can sit and discuss more about this trip. And happy rebuilding. I will inform the barrier teams about that. Goodbye. With a gentle smile on his face, Naruto said something a little more friendly than his usual icy tone. I would like that, Gigi. Thank you for your help and do take care. With that, they all replaced their masks and hoods, and one by one, they all sank into their vanishing shadows. Before noticing the paperwork, Sarutobi reclined in his chair. It was much less than what he used to do, but it was still hated. Disregarding the stacks before him, he took out an orange book, and for the next few hours, the only sounds emanating from the office were the third Hokage's twisted laughter. Clan no Mask Hall in Uzumaki outskirts, Konohagakure no Sato. 4 figures emerged from the shadows like drops of dew on a leaf as they rippled around the Uzumaki temple's entrance. As the 4 figures took off their hoods and revealed their masked faces to the world, the entire forest fell silent. A seductive female voice, identified by a woman wearing a modified Embu-type mask with a snake on it, asked, "Can't we just remove the henge now? I feel like we are on secret espionage mission. And why we have to hide our appearance now? We did not do so in Uzu." "Hubby, snake. You understand why we can't do so, and we are not talking about it until Usagi. Rabbit, makes sure that the entire area is empty and free of bugs and other monitoring devices. Then we shall talk, and I think to make you understand that we can't talk about it in the open." A woman in a peacock-shaped white mask with crimson streaks on it was reprimanded. "Area clear. We have not been followed till now. Let us do this. We have half an hour before the barrier team is informed and they raise the barrier so that we can do the remodeling. Shall we do this, Naruto-kun?" asked the girl in the rabbit mask. The last of them, a boy in a black mask with an image of an okami, wolf, on it, said, "Not now, Hinata. Let's enter the temple first. I will send some cage bunshin to plant the barrier and detection seals and to do some recon of the area. We need to make the entire area is marked completely." They all headed toward the deserted temple of the Uzumaki clan after Hinata nodded. When they arrived at the temple, Naruto turned to face the deserted clearing and made 30 highly charged shadow clones. Without saying a word, they all left for their assignments. They dispersed as Naruto's cage bunshin left the temple, and by the time they had halted their journey after traveling over 5 kilometers from their starting point, every clone was standing in front of a tree. The clones would have formed a circle with 30 points spaced at regular intervals if viewed from above. Each clone forged a tiny, bright blue chakra blade while moving in unison and holding up a finger. They stood in front of trees and started carving seals into their trunks together. After giving the clones all the necessary instructions for securing the clearing in the area they required, Naruto waited for 15 minutes before sitting on the floor at the Uzumaki temple and assuming a meditative position to get ready for the next phase. His clones were back at their posts, diligently engraving seals on 10 trees in ever more intricate designs. Naruto had started his own part of the assignment in the meantime. He collected and shaped a great deal of chakra with extreme care, holding onto it tightly. In essence, he was able to determine the precise frequency, if you will, of the clearing's background chakra by using his senses to examine the chakras of the nearby trees, plants, and animals. His training with Lord Hashirama and Lord Tobirama allowed him to master the true art of sensory ninjutsu, as opposed to modern ninjas who only learned the fundamentals and took shortcuts. He then started to change the nature of the chakra he had shaped with complete concentration. The chakra gradually changed from being specific to Naruto to eventually being indistinguishable from the chakra that pervaded the environment. This happened just in time, as he could sense that they had just completed inscribing the seals through the link he shared with all of his clones. The next and most challenging step was about to begin. He extended his hand once more, grasped all 30 chakra links to his shadow clones, and instructed them to complete their tasks. The clones were able to act in unison because they had an active chakra link between them. At the same time, they shaped all of their remaining chakra into a neutral chakra, put their hands on the freshly carved seals, and activated them, stopping the activation process just before it was finished. This effectively put the seals in a state of suspended animation, similar to drawing a circle and stopping just before closing it off. Naruto divided the meticulously prepared chakra into 30 equal parts, and after confirming that all of his clones were prepared, he sent them out along the chakra links. Each chakra packet traveled at a speed that guaranteed all of the clones received it simultaneously. This is the most delicate part of the entire process, and his clones' minds were right there with him. The clones sensed the chakra packets coming in, so they fed the chakra into the suspended seals without stopping the flow. They closed the loop as soon as the last of the incoming chakra was sucked into the seal, finishing the charging and activation of the seals. Due to the chakra's neutrality, no ninja was able to detect the chakra spike, and the area's concealment made sure that the light show that resulted was invisible. Naruto threw out all of his clones once the chakra eruption subsided. After rising from his meditative position, Naruto examined the recently constructed barrier surrounding the clearing he was in to ensure that everything he had planned was there and that nothing had gone wrong. He was pleased with his discovery. The only people who could find any part of the area he had just sealed would be him and those he personally synchronized with the seals. Even people who may have previously been aware of the area's existence would simply assume that the trees must have grown back after realizing that they couldn't find the entire area, just like they could in the core area of the Forest of Death. After all, who knows what the trees cultivated by the Shoden Hokage are capable of? After completing all of that, Naruto could finally start remodeling the space the way they desired and as he had discussed with his teachers prior to leaving Uzu. He got back up and gave others a nod. They all gave a nod in return, and then they all started taking off their cloaks and masks. After a brief moment of waiting, Naruto made 50 clones and left them to search the area for training grounds where they could receive suitable instruction in the use of the 5 elements and their different combinations. After finishing that, he got ready to go back to his friends and then relax. They could begin enjoying themselves now that he had made all the required arrangements. Before closing the temple door, he watched the clones vanish into the woods and thought absently that he ought to construct a blacksmith's forge in one of the numerous clearings in the region he had sealed to create custom weapons. Then, without even a whisper, he turned around and disappeared back into the mask hall's depths. They all exchanged glances before raising their hands in the ram seal and whispering, "Kai," at the same time. As a result, 4 distinct people were in the room, and their forms rippled to reveal who they really were. Kurenai Yuhi was the final member of Whirlpool's Yuhi clan. One of the last ninja clans in the old country of Uzu, the Yuhi were primarily assassins. Unlike most kunoichi, they were partners of the Uzumaki clan as their primary retainers during the Warring Clans era, when they lived in the Whirlpool before leaving and relocating to Konoha. They frequently worked covertly with them as their hidden hand in the village. Among mortals, she appeared to be a goddess of unadulterated beauty. Her face was framed by her black, slightly wavy hair that fell elegantly to the small of her back. Her namesake was a captivating shade of crimson, and her eyes were a pair of the most soul-piercing, seductive eyes that could possibly exist. The pupils had a ring of light red around them, but this had nothing to do with their dojutsu. It was just to enhance her beauty and give her an exotic, wild look that would drive any man crazy. If most men saw her new, undoubtedly dangerous look, they would be putty in her hands after just one glance. With her wide hips, round and protruding buttocks, small waist, and ample single E-cup bosom, her body was a magnificent example of the female body. It was nearly sinful to fit that body into the white and crimson dress she now wore, which was cut to reveal her cleavage and shortened so that her thighs were constantly visible. She accessorized it with sandals that were laced up to her calves. Her twin blades, each a foot and a half long from tip to tip and curved with elaborately crafted handles, made her as beautiful as a tiger. After mastering the Yuhi clan's taijutsu, she had adopted kenjutsu, which combined the use of daggers, kunai, senbon, and chakra scalpels to strike the opponent's muscles, nerves, and circulatory system. Overall, she was a very dangerous ninja who had chosen to be kunoichi, which is a more devious path. She was a seducer and a liar. She invested a great deal of time in fully mastering her kenjutsu technique, and as a result, Kurenai developed an amazing command of her abilities that enabled her to control the poison in such a way that she could kill a man with a single kiss.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.